Hello, everybody. Welcome to Lorebeards Role-Playing. Vera will be here very shortly. I'm just sort of kind of holding the phone, holding the fort for a little bit before she shows up. She's running a little bit behind. But today is going to be an interesting day because we're talking about one of my favorite game systems of all time. And also, I mean, a very controversial in some ways game system. It's fair to say I have a complicated history. But we're talking about the hero system or champions is probably the most well-known version of it is called champions. And we're gonna get into it now. Full disclosure for everybody here, I have written for and worked on many hero system products. I was involved with their fanzines for several years, which was Digital Hero and Easy Hero, for example. And I was also lead developer for Aaron Alston's Strike Force, which came out about 7 years ago. Let me rethink that. 2015. So 11 years ago. My God, I'm old. Anyway, so full disclosure, I am a guy who's worked on a bunch of hero system stuff, as well as a person who's played it for a very, very long time. Ever since 1989 is what I've been playing. Yep, season 2. This is our first episode of season 2. Thanks everybody for showing up today, supporting us here at Lorebeards and Role-Playing. This is, I mean, we love this show. We love being able to talk about role-playing games. We love being able to talk about role-playing, like how to role-play, how to be a better player, how to be a better DM. In season 1, we covered some of the basics, and we talked about a couple of different games, including RuneQuest, including Neon Odyssey, which was a really fun episode to do. Season 2, we're going to focus on more of the same. We're going to bring you more discussions of different game systems, and we're going to talk to more creators as well. And so, yeah, I'm excited to dive into it today. Yes, Vera owes us cookies, says Biofoot. I'll have to remember to ask her about that when she gets here. So, yeah, Vera says she's actually got a comment here. I'm going to bring it up. Sorry for the brief delay. I'm traveling right now and doing some troubleshooting for things that worked yesterday. So you know what's going on with her. Hey, we got a super chat from Ice Veins. Thank you so much, Ice Veins. He says, let's have a great start for season 2. Yes, agreed, 100%. And this is the part of the show where I say, if you want to see more Lorebeards and role-playing, if you like the content we produce on the channel, the best way to support us is with a super chat. And we are very, very grateful for everyone who supports us with super chats. It directly impacts the hosts like myself. It directly impacts the channel. So we're thank you very much for those kinds of things as we move forward. Biofoot, chocolate chip, please, for Vera. And she owes us fish tacos because I knew she went fishing this weekend. Sarquisian said, did she go fishing? Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Have to check that out. And we, Mickey Stopwatch, thank you for being a member. Woo, season 2. I agree. Probably the place you would know hero system from the most. Probably, and I say this because it's just the most visible thing from the hero system that ever happened was a superhero setting called Champions, which was kind of its own game line, and eventually became an MMO called Champions Online, which is still going today. If you really want to see like the Champions universe and understand like some of the characters and some of the storylines, that's the way to do it, is to play Champions Online. And there you go. So that's the most well-known version of the hero system. But the hero system was a really interesting part of my history because the hero system is the first game that I was playing as a role-playing game that sort of taught me how to tinker with the rules. It taught me how to break down the ideas of the story and the mechanics and find ways where they work together, because in the hero system you build just about everything. You build not only your character, you build how their powers work, you build how their disadvantages work. It is a very crunchy system. It's considered one of the most complex role-playing games in the world, and it is very math heavy. Actually, I credit Champions with giving me an extremely solid base in your low level arithmetic. You know, not just adding and subtracting, but multiplication, division, and fractions and algebra. Like all of those things are a part of Champions in the hero system when you're building your characters, because everything's built on points. If you have a certain number of points to build your character, those points can be spent on your attributes, they can be spent on your skills, they can be spent on your powers, and a few other things as well. But and different stats have different costs. It costs more to level up your dexterity than it does to level up your strength, for example. And when I say level up, I mean just increase. I don't mean there's no such thing as levels in the hero system. And so simultaneously, heroes' complexity, its ability to reflect just about anything you could build in the system, is both its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. And we will talk about those things today. Now, something that's really interesting too about the hero system is it went through many different hands. This is a game property that has started out with one company, went to another company, went to another company, went to another company. There's like at least one big scandal we needed to talk about involving the hero system, and the stewardship of the game has greatly influenced the perception of it and the things that happened around it. So we're gonna get into that today. I'm hoping Vera will be here soon. I don't know how much longer she will be, but we will definitely welcome her when she arrives. So let's just, I guess, talk about the history a little bit of the hero system. This is a game that was created in 1981. And this is something I know a lot about. I want to be as open as I can be. I'm actually friends with a lot of the creators of the game. I've met some of the people that were there at the very beginning. And it was created by Ray Greer and George McDonald and quite a few other people. And Ray Greer tells a really interesting story about that 1981 launch, because they launched it at a convention, and they had found a space outside the dealer's room to set up their little booth with their little copies of the hero system, which at the time were, you know, basically just mimeographed, just like stapled collections of paper, right? It wasn't really a full book. And Ray had realized that their position right outside the dealer's hall was actually excellent, because literally everyone at this convention was funneling past them to get in, which gave them incredible visibility. So what he did is he found a model who was willing to come and work, and she dressed up in her Wonder Woman costume because she happened to have one, and Champions being a superhero system, this got a lot of attention from the people in line, and they managed to sell a lot of books that particular convention. I'm wearing my Xavier Institute t-shirt because it is about superheroes. The hero system does extend beyond superheroes. It is a generic system that can basically handle almost any genre, but it is most well known and is certainly built upon a foundation of superhero gaming. So when you hear us talk about Champions, that's the main game line of the hero system, but there were others. There was Western hero, fantasy hero, cyber hero, many others that go along that path, and each one of those was its own different genre of play. And possibly one of the biggest names associated with it is a guy named Aaron Alston, which not only is he an amazing game designer, he codified the basic rule set for D&D, wrote a whole bunch of stuff for the Known World, for TSR, and created just a shit ton of role-playing game products. But he also an extremely well known author of science fiction and fantasy. He wrote several of the X-Wing books for the Star Wars novel series, and a lot of people may know him from that. Got a super chat from Brock 6000. Thank you, Brock. Big super chat too. Thank you. He says, a bunch of my friends and family are reading the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. I have read those books. I think all but the last one, I think. He says, I love that this is getting them interested in tabletop role-playing games, but I'm a little worried this will push them to be extreme power or metagamers. GM advice? Question mark. Ooh, okay. So the question is, how do I get my friends and family to play role-playing games without being extreme power / metagamers? Well, I think so. System mastery is a part of every role-playing game. After some role-playing games are so simple, like Lasers and Feelings, or I suppose Powered by the Apocalypse games, where min-maxing is just not really a thing. But there are some games like Hero System and Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition where the system mastery will reward you in having a more effective character than you otherwise would be playing. So I'm always going to default back to, as long as everybody has fun, you have succeeded. You have won the game. You have made a good time for everybody, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day. But in this case, I think communication is your best bet, right? If this is something that is an issue for you, we have a whole episode on session 0. So I would recommend you set up a session 0 with the people who are interested in getting into a tabletop role-playing game, and just have a frank discussion about it. Just say, listen, this is one of my concerns, and I don't want you guys to get too freaked out about or obsessed with making super strong characters, because what it's really about is having a good time. So that would be the place I would start. And then, one-on-ones as the dungeon master, like ask everybody to make a character, send their character sheet to you via email or something like that, so you can review it. And then, like, if there's anything that jumps out at you, you can talk to them later. But if you're clear and open about, what you want and what's going to make the game something good for you as well as good for them, I think most people will be on board. So that's where I'm going to go with that. You got Godzilla Rex. Woo, X-Men. Yes, big X-Men fan right here. I've read the comics in like a long time, so I'm pretty far behind on the comics. I know I'm familiar with like the events of the Krakoa era, but that's about as much as I know, and I'm not even super familiar with it. I've heard about it. Stefan Roy says, speaking of Xavier, McAvoy or Stewart? Thanks, Deadpool. Honestly, I like them both. I think they both did excellent as Xavier. I'm interested. I would like to see Giancarlo Esposito give it a try, honestly. But I think both McAvoy and Stewart did excellent, just in different ways. All right, Joe Numbers. Good afternoon from home, Lorebeards. Have my $2 tax. Thanks, Joe Numbers. We appreciate you, sir. Are you by any chance Australian? Is that why it's a good afternoon? I don't know. I hope that's not offensive. I'm curious. At any rate, so the same core rule system for the Hero system, it also did Justice Incorporated, which was a pulp game, Danger International, which was espionage, Fantasy Hero Star Hero, and a game called Robot Warriors, which was one of Aaron Alston's games. So it was basically early mecha. And they were all compatible with Champions. Your Champions characters could go and do all these things. One of the strengths of the Hero system is that it was very scalable. You could have, for the most part, there are some rules that I definitely don't think scale very well, like telepathy and mind control are just awful at scaling. But for the most part, you could play street level superheroes or espionage or pulp heroes all the way up to full on Superman Justice League stuff. One of the problems that is an issue with Champions, with Hero system in general, is the idea of the points limits. They were pretty arbitrary, and especially early on, they offered you a certain number of points to make a starting out superhero, and those points were appropriate for building like a Teen Titans character, but you really couldn't build a Justice League character. It didn't really fit. And in many of the games that I ran, I increased the points that were available if I wanted to have a more higher powered game. And at least in one campaign I ran, I did away with points limits altogether and just said build to your concept, and went from there. And actually, it worked really well, shockingly. If you're familiar with Champions, that's like super heresy, though. That is a house rule that most Champions players would raise their eyebrows over. You did what? You got rid of points limits. So Champions went through first edition, second edition, third edition. They were all multiple. They were typically multiple books. There was your players, character creation, and a game master's guide, and enemies books is what they called their bestiaries. Enemies 1, enemies 2, enemies 3, etc. But everything kind of came together though with the fourth edition of the game. The fourth edition of the game. This was 1989. It's called the Big Blue Book. That's what it's called, because it is massive. It's like this. It's a couple of inches thick, and the cover is by well-known comic book artist George Perez. It's excellent. It's outstanding. Fourth edition actually had several straight-up comic book creators as illustrators. Adam Hughes did a cover for it. Ben Dunn of Antarctic Press, you may know him from Ninja High School and a few other comics that he made. He also did a cover. A couple of covers. And then there was Adam Hughes, George Perez. Pat Zurcher, who is a comic book illustrator. He did the majority of the black and white interior art during the fourth edition era, especially for the enemies, especially for the NPCs. Zurcher did almost all of that art. So fourth edition feels very comic booky, which is one of the advantages it has, but also it was the first time they put everything in one book, all the rules, all the game master stuff, and a good selection of bad guys. Like if you picked up that Big Blue Book in 1989, you could just play. You could just sit down, make characters, and go, which was really cool. And that's how I got into Champions, was that book. And I was still, would have been first year of high school for me. And I loved it. Just the idea of being able to build your characters and build their powers and build how everything worked. It was fascinating. And sometimes the way that the creativity involved in how you built your character, it turned character creation into a mini game. Like character creation was a mini game that you won by making a character that you liked and was also mechanically elegant in some ways. Now, what do I mean by this? All right. So remember how I was saying that everything's points based. And a lot of character creation is getting the most out of your character by getting the most out of their points. And you could do this by what are called power frameworks, which were ways to get a points cost break, like a discount, if you built powers a certain way. Like Batman's utility belt. You could buy each individual item, or you could buy what's called the multi-power, which was a framework that you could then have individual slots for each of the Batman ability, Batman utility belt things. And it just made things cheaper. So that was one way to do it. But also you could add disadvantages onto things to make them cheaper. Like I can only fly when I'm singing my superhero song, for example. That would make your flight cheaper. Or if all your powers came through a battle suit that could potentially be taken away from you or damaged. So these things were interesting. I liked the creativity of finding interesting ways to build characters and make their stuff work differently. And this it got very complicated because you could have a disadvantage that also had a disadvantage attached to it. Or a way to get rid of it, the disadvantage, which is called buying it off. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine named Charlie, he made a character who had absorbed energy from an alien spacecraft and could then fly and shoot energy beams. Very, very Captain Marvel, okay? And he decided that flying around and shooting energy beams was difficult. It cost him a resource called endurance. Everything you did in Hero System cost endurance points. And you would need to rest every so often to recover your endurance points or what have you. So he had bought all his powers they cost additional endurance, which lowered the cost. But then he bought off some of that disadvantage by saying, as long as I wear these bracers that I had made from the engine of the ship, I don't suffer that penalty. So the savings he would have gotten from the ×2 endurance cost, he didn't get quite as much of a savings because he could get rid of that disadvantage with the bracers, which are what's called a focus, an item that if it is taken away or removed or damaged, you don't get the effects of that item. And it's meant to represent things like Green Lantern's power ring or Batman's utility belt. Yeah, GURPS, Focano, GURPS is very contemporary. Now, the difference between GURPS and Champions, I can actually tell you, it's kind of interesting. In GURPS, you buy all your powers individually. In Champions, you don't. You kind of reason from the goal of Champions or Hero System is to reason from effect. What does it do, and then build to that. Okay, and the difference between those two things in GURPS, let's say I want to do a Fire Blast. Well, there's probably a power called Fire Blast, and that's what I would buy. If I wanted to fire an electrical blast, I would have to buy a different power, because fire and electricity, they do different things. With Champions, they're like, no. It's just an energy blast. The fire or the electric part, that is what's called the special effect. That special effect is set when you buy the power. So if you want to blast somebody with fire and that fire can set them on fire, you would buy an energy blast with some sort of advantage that would, linger the damage or whatever afterwards, as in setting them on fire. But you wouldn't have to buy separate powers if you wanted to also do an electrical blast. You could just say, okay, I also have an electrical blast. Anyway, this is getting deep in the weeds, so I apologize for getting deep in the weeds on this, because it's going to be that kind of show, guys. Champion system is very complicated. I'm trying to give you like the most basic examples I can. All right, so 4th edition kind of put everything in one book. You could then play it. That's how I got into it. 5th edition came along later, but there was some stuff in the middle there that we need to talk about. So originally it was created by a group called Hero Games. This was, George McDonald and Steve Peterson and Ray Greer, and they made Champions 1st edition through 3rd edition. But around the time of the late 1980s, so Peterson went on to do more computer game stuff. Like he wanted to create computer games. So that's kind of where he went into. Still is in there. I think he's still doing it. But they got all their stuff bought by a group called Iron Crown Enterprises. So this is called, quote unquote, the Ice Age. ICE being Iron Crown Enterprises. And during the Ice Age, this is when 4th edition really flourished. It had over 100. No. It had well over 50 products, though. That's a lot of products, including one that had to be recalled. There was an adventure called Wings of the Valkyrie that had to be pulled off the store shelves because the core concept of Wings of the Valkyrie was it was an adventure that sent your heroes time traveling back to World War II to stop an assassination attempt on Hitler. The idea being that if Hitler survived, he would lose the war, whereas if Hitler died, his replacement would be smarter and thus potentially win the war. Let's just say it was problematic. That's a good way to put it. Anyway, that adventure exists. It got pulled off the store shelves. If you're ever curious, you can look it up. Wings of the Valkyrie. It's pretty wild. Yeah, oof. Yeah, Rush. I agree. Absolutely, I agree. During the Ice Age, it was basically under the editorial purview of a man we all would know much more later on, Monty Cook. Monty Cook was one of the original editors for the Ice Age of Champions. After the Ice Age, we get into a period where a couple of companies picked it up. First was R. Talsorian. They invested in it. R. Talsorian is, of course, the guys who do Cyberpunk. and Teenagers from Outer Space. It's Mike Pondsmith's company. Mike Pondsmith, of course, is one of the most successful indie RPG creators of all time, because Cyberpunk 2077 is, of course, huge, huge. So when it was under Artel Sorian, they actually took the Interlock system, which is the home system for all of the Artel Sorian RPGs, and they mashed it together with the Hero system and created something called Fusion. And during this period, they published quite a few products related to anime. There's like the Bubblegum Crisis RPG and its source book, which, if you're a fan of Bubblegum Crisis, those books are awesome. And I am a fan of Bubblegum Crisis. But also they created what's called Champions New Millennium, which was, I think, about a dozen products, maybe less. It was not very well supported, but it was an attempt to do Champions under a different but very similar rule sets called Fusion. Unfortunately, this was not very popular with Champions fans. I personally was like, I don't know what this is. I'd been playing 4th edition for years at this point, and I was like, I don't know what this is. This doesn't feel right to me. I wish I'd have given it more of a chance. I wish gamers in general had given it more of a chance, because I feel like there was a lot of value in there in that Champions New Millennium that we just kind of skipped over. It is what it is, though. It was very unpopular, and it died early. And then you get to one of the most interesting scandals in all of gaming. It's a thing called the Cyber Games scandal. This happened between 2000 and 2001, so it's 25 years old at this point. And if you're not familiar with it, that's okay. It was a scandal that mostly affected smaller games, but basically there was this guy called Cliff Parati. And Cliff Parati had founded cybergames.com with investment from his wife's retail firm. And the idea with cybergames.com, it was meant to be like an online gaming portal. And he wanted to buy up a whole bunch of different properties and say, if you want to play these games, you need to use our portal. And it was trying to leverage the web, really. Not a terrible idea, really. And there were things that they made during this period. There was a game called Shards of the Stone, which is actually really cool. Created by a friend of mine. Well, created by several people, I should say, but headed up by Sean Patrick Fannin, who is a game designer and one of my former roommates, I should say very clearly. And Sean built that, but there was also a bunch of different products that eventually there were a lot of things created for Shards of the Stone that ended up going to different places. Ed Greenwood had a setting that went to Margaret Weiss, for example. And anyways, I'm getting off topic. So what was the Cyber Games scandal? So Cyber Games, they bought possibly the other thing you might know, they bought Savage Worlds. They bought the Pinnacle Entertainment Group. And Shane Hensley, the head of Pinnacle, had to literally buy back his own stuff later on when Cyber Games collapsed. And it did. It collapsed after about a year. The idea was to use the RPGs as a basis for online communities. Again, not a terrible idea. But what happened was they hired a bunch of people, including Steve Peterson, Bruce Harlick, who's another one of the original creators of Hero, and Emperor's Choice too. They picked up Cyber Games owned the rights to Arduin Grimoire. That's what Emperor's Choice is. Anyway, so this was the .com era, and they were putting together a deal to make a Witchblade role-playing game, which was there was a TV show for Witchblade that was in the works and eventually did get made. Not a great TV show, but there it is. It existed. And this was all part of the plan for Cyber Games, but eventually it just cannibalized itself. The initial funding had been pulled, and so they were just wasting money on a bunch of stuff. And so the license, the property of Hero Games got just tossed into the wind. Eventually, so late 2001, Cyber Games, just the website's down, and people are like, what happened? There's no way to find out what's going on. It was this created kind of the period of darkness for a hero system. For the next 5 years, between 2001 2006, it was kind of fallow. Like, there was things happening behind the scenes, but the game was essentially dead for that period of time. One thing that was keeping the game alive was actually a good friend of mine, Michael Serbrook, who had his website called Serbrook Stuff. And this was, early days of the internet. And if you were searching for champions or hero system back in those days, you would most likely be directed to Serbrook Stuff, because he had these vast quantities of characters that he built, referencing pop culture films and television, and even he even took like popular music and make a character based on a song, and just did this like every day for a very long time. So he kind of carried the torch for the system. But what had actually happened was a company called DOJ, Defenders of Justice, which was built by Darren Watts, Stephen Long, Jason Walters, and a few other people. They'd bought the rights for the hero games, and they were coming up with the 5th edition, which 5th edition of the game. I know this sounds like it's all happening at the same time, but it really isn't. The Cyber Games era was just, there was nothing happening for hero games. So they had it. They were like trying to create something, but nothing really happened. There was New Millennium, but nobody really counted that as a thing. So there was hero game stuff happening during those 5 years. Just none of it was none of it was in the space where people who wanted to play the game could find it. But then you get to the DOJ era, the 5th edition era. This is my full disclosure. This is my least favorite era of hero. The books made for 5th edition were, in Darren's own words, Darren Watts, who was a good friend of mine, rest in peace, Darren, he was a good man. But in Darren's own words, the plan was to do quantity over quality. They just wanted to make book after book after book after book, and they didn't really care that much if it was a good product or not. And this led to some serious problems. First of all, they'd hired Steve Long, who was a lawyer previously. Oh, hey, there's Vera.
Hi, so sorry. I have been battling technology. Little heroism of my own.
Hey! Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hello. Hi, I'm Vera. Right, for wherever I make stuff. I troubleshoot mobile setups at the beach. I'm traveling with family right now because summer started. I'm done teaching for the year.
So Zarquichin says you owe us fish tacos from your fishing
trip. I will see to it. My goal is to catch mackerel with my loving father over the week, and if we do, I will assuredly make fish tacos with corn and rice, and I will post them in the Lorebeards Discord.
Holy mackerel!
Ha ha!
Holy mackerel, Batman!
Oh, it is pretty holy. It's good stuff. We're fishing for like croakers and stuff on the beach right now, though, in the afternoon. So
nice.
Not as edible.
So for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Ross Watson. I'm a game designer and author. I've worked on over 100 different role-playing game products, including several hero games products, which is part of the topic today. You may know me from things like Torg Eternity, Savage Worlds Rifts, Star Wars Edge of the Empire, and most of the Warhammer 40k roleplay game line. Those are kind of the highlights.
Impressive stuff.
Now, have you ever played Champions or the hero system?
No, but I am fascinated by them as somebody who grew up reading a lot of Bronze Age and Silver Age comics. My mom had like all of the man, she had a lot of like the original Avengers essentials and things, Brood Wars stuff. Like there was a lot of cool things going on in my household when I was like a little girl. So I have a deep interest and fascination with the comic book vibe of heroism. I've not gotten to play that.
So fun fact, there are two role-playing game systems specifically that became comic book lines of their own, or were involved with comic book creators very deeply. One of the things I mentioned earlier is that a lot of artists in 4th edition of Champions included guys like George Perez, Adam Hughes, and Pat Zurcher.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And there was a Champions, the Hero Comics was a thing for a while, and it featured characters from the first 3 editions of Champions, including the Huntsman and Foxbat and Flare. And the creators of that comic book eventually got the rights to some of those characters, and those characters then left the Champions universe. They were never to be seen again in the Champions universe, but they stayed in that comic book, which published for quite a while. The other game, of course, would be Villains and Vigilantes, created by Jeff D., who's a fantastic TSR artist, and Bill Willingham, who you would know from the Fables comics and the Elementals and a few other things. Bill Willingham started out doing role-playing games and then went on to do like shitloads of comics. So fun times.
Well, again, I grew up reading the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, so that's kind of crazy. I didn't know.
Yeah, if you're ever curious, do a Google search on Bill Willingham and comics, and you'll see all the stuff that he's worked on, and it's pretty wild. But also the hero comics, the comics associated with the hero system, unfortunately, never really were more than indie darlings. Like they never really. You probably have never read a Flare comic. You've probably never read a Huntsman comic, but
Certainly
they existed. They did exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were talking about the editions of Champions. I was just getting into my least favorite edition, which is the 5th edition of the game, created by, largely written by Steve Long, who was a lawyer before he was a game designer. And the 5th edition games, the 5th edition of this game system is, by the creator's own admission, is about quantity over quality. They made over 100 different game products, but the problem is, they're all like incredibly thick. Like the 5th edition book is like this thick. It's famously bulletproof in that you could fire a bullet at that book and it wouldn't penetrate all the way through the book.
Oh yeah.
And so you have a really big, thick book. So it's, first of all, a little intimidating. Secondly, it's written not unlike a textbook. It's very dry. And thirdly, it's laid out like a textbook. It's got these side columns. It's got the very dense text in the middle. And 5th edition is also famous for the worst artwork of all of the editions.
Well, it's hard to live up to like industry giants, right?
Well, again, they were intentionally going for quantity over quality. This was the early 2000s. This was the D20 era. Role-playing games were selling like hotcakes, and they made a good amount of money just by having books on shelves to sell. But the problem was they were very boring looking. They were very dry. They were very boring to read, and they were very thick. So they looked like college textbooks. And if you go to a role-playing game store looking for a cool, exciting role-playing game about superheroes, college textbook is probably not what you want. Also, they went full black and white. There were hardly any color at all. Even some of the covers are just like very basic graphic design. Part of this was because I don't know if you've seen the 5th edition system books, but they're basic.
I'm looking right now. It is it is a different energy than you'd expect.
Yeah. So 5th edition was successful in that it was the most well-supported edition of the game, but it was also, in my opinion, the most boring. Out of those hundreds of books, there's only a few that I would even say are worth reading, unfortunately. 6th edition, though. 6th edition is the first time that Hero System went all out full color. Had full color on the covers, full color on the interiors. The layout's excellent. They hired really good artists for a change. How did they do this, Vera? Well, they sold the IP of the Champions universe and the Champions characters to Cryptic Studios, who made the Champions Online MMO, and that gave them the cash injection they needed.
I think I played Champions Online.
I have as well. It's pretty fun, actually. If you're an MMO guy, it's pretty cool.
I know, it's cute stuff.
Not much else to say about 6th edition. 6th edition is probably, it's not my favorite. 4th edition is my favorite. 6 is maybe my second favorite edition of the game. They cleaned up a lot of rules issues, and again, it looks very pretty. It's just far more exciting and better art, better layout. The writing is not nearly as dry. It's still mostly Stephen Long. Steve Long doing it. And Steve Long's approach to Champions was very, very specific. This is already a very complicated game, okay? And there was kind of a push to allow for your character to do more fun things with their powers. Like let's say I'm playing an ice guy, and I have spent my points on, you know, creating an ice slide to get around and ice armor to protect myself, and I have like an ice blast, right? Like to hurt villains.
Classic.
That's a pretty reasonable character. Now, what if we're at a party and I just want to make some ice cubes to put into your drink? Okay. In most role-playing games, this would just be nothing. I just do it. I just do it because that's my power. I'm an ice guy. I just make ice. No big deal. Steve Long's approach to Champions was that everything should be defined. Everything should be defined. So if you wanted a power to create ice cubes, you would buy a power called Transform. You would define that power as I transform air into ice cubes. There would be a points cost involved. It would tell you how many ice cubes and how much of a volume of ice you could create. It got silly. Steve Long's approach was to define everything, and that unfortunately made the game just like over complicated in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like structurally, that's similar to how Magic worked in a 4th edition Warhammer. Where unlike 3rd edition, where you can kind of do whatever as long as it was in the purview of your wind, in 4th edition, you have your various petty magics, and you have your lure spells, and that's it. Like there was a mechanic in a 3rd of Woofer where you could sort of just do things that felt right as long as you could infer the appropriate magic words. But tonally, I think Warhammer's a bit better suited to a super orthodox system of abilities than, say, having dominion over ice, right? Because Iceman, to pull from the canonical and official example of our ice sliding fella, he was able to like refine his own body to go from a puffy snowball to a chiseled icon, right?
Well, yeah, he eventually became an Omega level mutant and could do like insanely crazy stuff with cold, which is wild. So 6th edition, just to be clear, like how far in the past we're talking. 6th edition was 2009, and there hasn't been a new book for 6th edition in, I want to say, 12 years.
But that was the same year that City of Heroes became Champions Online, right?
Well, it's a little more complicated than that, but that's basically. I mean, that's the very like high level overview. Yeah, that's essentially what happened.
So I played in the City of Heroes era, so I was trying to like contextualize.
So I want to be clear to people, like most of the time when we talk about a role-playing game on this channel, we're talking about games that are active, they're actively going. They're games that are available to purchase and available to play, and there's people still doing it. Champions in the Hero system is not one of those games. Champions has been dead for years. The last product they made was a thing called Champions Now. It was a Kickstarter. It was an attempt to do a new edition of the game by going way back to like 3rd edition rules. And it was created by Ron Edwards, one of the famous guys from the Forge website. And it is generally considered to be not a very good edition of Champions by Champions players, including myself. Champions Now is one of those editions of the games, probably one of the very few editions of the game I can think of where nobody plays it. You will have a very hard time finding an active group playing Champions Now. Whereas I think Champions 6, you can probably still find groups playing that. Anyway, so Champions has been dead for a while. In fact, the company DOJ, I think, is no longer a thing. Jason Walters still runs the what is that indie game roundup? What is that called? There's a indie games like organization, and he's part of that.
Oh, I can't place it.
Yeah, I know there is one though. I'm sure one of our chats probably one of the guys in the chat probably knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, that's the history of the Hero system in short. Leading us 45 minutes talking about that. My God. Vera, what would you like to talk about? I've been yakking for a while.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the idea of expressing the entirety, the breadth of superhero possibilities in a role-playing game, because that is ambitious, and I can see why 5th went for quantity over quality, because if you look at the breadth of comic books and the breadth of like superheroing and super villainy, there is a lot you can do. Like if you want to talk about one form of media that touches on perhaps every possible setting, every possible story structure, every narrative beat, I think that comic books would do it, like superheroing. It's almost like the genre of film, right? There's just so much you can do.
True. And Champions, or Hero System, actually, Hero System is one of the very first universal systems. This one and GURPS were like neck and neck for the very first, like, do anything with this system role-playing games. And coming out in 81, I think maybe Hero System has the edge on that, being like the first one. But unlike GURPS, which is truly universal in that there's no like foundational, there's no foundational genre. Like GURPS is very much like anything you want. Hero was built on that foundation of superhero role playing, and that has been its legacy ever since. It's most people look at the Hero System and Champions as a superhero game rather than a universal system that mostly does superheroes.
Right, but even in the 4th edition guide, there was a section like heroic versus super heroic stuff, right? Like they wanted you to be able to play sword and sorcery games, which are also comic books. That is also comic books. There are Conan comics, which are amazing. Or alternatively, your Superman, Justice League kind of vibe.
Oh yeah, and I read all that shit. I'm excited to bring in 4th edition. 4th edition is my favorite edition of the game. It was so colorful and so full of really interesting vibrant, dynamic things. Like every book that I picked up in 4th edition gave me something interesting to look at, something interesting to build on. They have a source book. One of my favorite source books of all time is actually called Champions in 3D from 4th edition. And this was the first multiverse role-playing game supplement. It was like, here's how to take your characters to a world where World War II never ended, to a world where everyone's a talking animal, to a world where it's full of horror monsters and things like that. They had a thing called Backworld, and Backworld was the mirror universe of your own campaign setting, where all the good guys are bad guys and all the bad guys are good guys.
Oh, like, classic!
That's so awesome! Holy shit! Right? Oh, GURPS is 1985. So yeah, Champions is earlier than that. Thank you. Hey, Juppe Rantalainen, our friend from Nordic LARP. Appreciate you. Appreciate you very much. So yeah, Champions, its core promise was if you can describe it, you can build it. It's a toolkit, all right? And it's very, very crunchy. The character creation section of Champions is larger than most role-playing games. It literally has more pages than role-playing games. This means it's very flexible. You can build across all kinds of different genres, all kinds of different power levels, as we talked about earlier. It has great. It scales very well up and down with a few issues that I mentioned before. And you can have a very deep and precise character building experience. Like it's building a character in Hero System is almost like a mini game of its own.
Which I love. I'm a big fan of character creation, character construction, considering how you might deploy an NPC somewhere, making alt characters and so on. It's fun to like build characters to the table using character rules, right?
It did have also really fun tactical combat, although combat could be very, very long because there's a lot of bookkeeping involved. There was different types of damage. There was different types of resources you spent to make things happen. They tracked time over a 12-second turn. And
twice as long as normal, yeah.
And part of that was a stat called speed. Speed was how often you got to act in any given turn. Yeah. And this was a stat you could purchase. You could buy a higher speed stat if you wanted to, which could lead to some serious problems. And one of the first house rules that most people, at least in my experience, most people played, was they standardized speed. They were like, everybody's got 4 speed. They get to act 4 times in a 12-second turn, because otherwise it was a simple matter for someone to just get more spotlight time at the table by taking more turns than everyone else.
But what about your playgroup's pull from the iconic hero, the Wizard, the Speed Freak?
Well, speedsters, here's a fun fact. Speedsters do a lot more on their turn, but they don't necessarily take more turns. They don't need to take more turns. You can build your speedster to do a lot of things on your turn and feel like you are super fast without actually taking up way more time at the table than anyone else.
This anticipates a discussion we're going to have during Eclipse phase at some point, probably this season, about mental actions and physical actions and how many you can take in one turn. Because in first edition, it was a lot, and that was a similar issue.
Yeah, and again, I said this before you got on the air, but I have a long history with this game. I was involved with a lot of the fanzines, and I wrote for the version of Strike Force that came out about 11 years ago. So I have a lot of history with this game. I've made a lot of characters and played a lot of campaigns of Hero. So those are the things that Champions does very well, but there are things it doesn't do very well. It has a very steep learning curve.
You don't say like what 120 pages of CC, so
it's front loaded, it's math heavy. New players will need coaching. It is also a construction set. It doesn't actually give you. One of the problems with this game is it doesn't give you what you need most of the time. You're going to have to build the bad guys. You're going to have to build the spells. You're going to have to build the magic items. There's a supplement called Fantasy Hero, which is how to play fantasy games using the hero system, which I have done at least 3 or 4 times actually, and it's actually great. Like I love the way Champions works, but it was so hard to GM because you'd have to make up every monster, every magic item, every encounter was multiplied in terms of your prep work because you had to design it. It wasn't just available to you like it was in a D&D book.
Yeah, because unlike say there's a list of creature traits in Warhammer, right? We have just sections where it describes like the ghostly whale or their undying nature. In Hero System, you have descriptors and advantages and disadvantages for powers, and you have to find a way to assemble those into a rough facsimile of what you want it to do, and then narrate how it works to make it clear. And that is a GM burden. You're going to figure that out.
There's a lot of things that could be very unfun, like having to stop and rest to recover your stun or your endurance, which stun is how much damage you can take before you get knocked out, and endurance is the thing that your powers run off of. It's like juice that powers your abilities. A lot of bookkeeping involved. And again, a very common house rule was to just not worry about endurance. It's hard. I need to be clear about this. Endurance was not fun, and it was unpopular. Most people I played with just didn't really like it as a thing. And yet, Champions now, the most recent version of someone trying to do Champions, built everything like endurance was like super important to the core of that game, and that's one of the reasons why most Champions players are just like, no, thank you, no, thank you.
I do like the idea that resting can represent your prep time if you're a Batman-esque character.
Well, I mean, yeah,
it shouldn't for Superman though. He's fine.
It's one of those weird parts of the game. We actually mentioned this a few episodes ago when we talked about weird rules, and I said there was a baby could throw a football like 50 yards in Champions because it's a balanced aerodynamic object. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Vince Lombardi right there at the crib. Okay, kid, sign up. The basic mechanic of the hero system is a 3d6 roll under system. You would have if you were decently skilled at computer programming and you needed to make a computer programming roll, you would roll 3d6 and you were looking for a number typically around 11 or less, which is around a 51 or 52% success rate.
Okay.
Which is higher than Warhammer Fantasy, for example. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Higher than Dark Heresy.
Which have default like very low odds of success and things.
Right. But the things you could do in combat were limited. The game always said you had to move and then make an action. You couldn't move, take an action, and then move again. You couldn't take an action and then move. You had to finish your move and then take an action, which was awkward in Action Economy. The facings were all done in hexes. So you had to have a hex map instead of a square map.
I see. We're going to the grid.
Mm-hmm. And combat was infamous for taking hours of time to resolve. Did I hit? Did I do enough damage? Then I have to make sure I do my bookkeeping for how much endurance I spent on that attack. Then I have to do my bookkeeping for how much endurance I got back at the end of the turn, or stun that I got back at the end of the turn if I had been hit. And there were different types of damage. There was killing damage and regular damage. It bogged down. Unfortunately, combat bogged down quickly.
To perhaps make this a little easier to grasp, but endurance is kind of like ammo, but everything runs on ammo. And if you've ever played a ranger at a table where the GM is a real stickler for keeping track of your various volleys, it can be complicated. And if literally everything keys off it, then add that to facing. And like a lot of systems now issue facing entirely because God, is it complicated. That's a lot. Plus with the complexity of the powers themselves.
It can be. So the most common thing that would happen in especially 6th edition, which raised the power, the point value of a character from a superhero character was like 250 points in 3rd edition. By 6th edition, that was like a 400 point character. And if you sit someone down and you hand them a book that's this thick and say, you've got 400 points to spend, and here's your blank character sheet, that's a fucking death sentence for that game. Because that new player is going to be like, what even is this?
Yeah, it's for crunch enjoyers or people who are down to have their hands held. I guess if you had a GM who was like really there to just make everybody's characters for them, they could go off vibes and be assigned something. They still have to then run it and pilot it and track it, which is also difficult. So
most Champions campaigns usually had the GM or someone else who was a very good system master of Champions build everyone else's characters. Just tell me what you want, I'll build it for you. It became a very common thing. Also, it was well known for having just huge handfuls of dice. In 4th edition, if you were a pretty powerful character, you probably had 10 or 12 dice worth of attack, and you would roll that all at once. That's a big handful of dice. Okay. And there is something satisfying. There's something honestly very haptic about it, about having a handful of dice that big and getting to roll it and saying like, that's a lot of damage. But counting up, there were 2 ways to do damage. The stun damage from a 10d6 attack was simple. You added up all the pips, that's how much stun you did. Body damage was different. Body damage was if it was not a 1 or a 6, it was 1 point. If it was a 6, it was 2 points, and if it was a 1, it was 0. So you would sorry, go ahead.
I'm just trying to parse that.
Yeah, so I could roll 10 dice, get 30 stun, and 10 body, which is the average. That's literally the average on 10d6 is 10 body, 30 stun. But being able to count that quickly, that's an acquired skill. It's another reason why combat got bogged down, because sometimes you'd have 15d6, 20d6. Sometimes you'd have to count.
Hello?
Yeah.
It's an acquired skill.
Sometimes
like many dice games, it's a bit of a player learning curve, I guess. We've lost Ross for a moment.
No, I'm still here. Can
Hello?
you hear me?
Okay, cool. Hi. You lost me. Oh my god.
Technological issues today. Sorry, everyone.
Tech is scary.
The big mountains of dice is another big part of the hero system. But yeah, it was the prep time, the setup time, the math. It made it very, very easy to bog down. And unfortunately, a lot of people had really bad experiences with it over the years. And it was one of the most difficult games to get a new player into. But I love
Which is a shame. Because it tracks to like one of the most common power fantasies people have. Like we love Marvel movies, right? Like that was a phenomenon for a long while now. Comic books have been huge for ages and ages. Like they're the epitome of nerd culture, right? The comic book shop is the birthplace of the friendly local gaming store for a lot of us. So
now the Champions books, though, despite the system, you can argue this is actually similar with GURPS. Is that people who don't like the GURPS system love the GURPS source books, and the Hero System source books were really good. Like they did a source book, as I said, just on multiverses. They did source books on things like, you know, teen superheroes or like street level adventures, like what they call Dark Champions, which was what if Batman the animated series, but even more violent. And even more, maybe, you know, crank the darkness up a few notches with like drug use and like human trafficking. So Dark Champions, I ran several games. Dark Champions, super fun. It's rare to find a game that's willing to do that kind of street level supers. But so it had a lot of great source books. It actually had a pretty good setting, the Champions universe, with a lot of really interesting characters. And of course, that is one of the reasons why it was picked up for to become an MMO. Let's say you're an MMO company and you can't do City of Heroes for whatever reason, but you want to do something like City of Heroes, but you don't want to spend the money to get DC or Marvel, but you do want all the work done already on who the villains are, what the world is like. What do? Well, if you're Cryptic, you have a connection to the role-playing game industry through the Jack Emmert, who was the CEO and is now the current CEO of Cryptic, and my former boss. I used to work for Jack. Jack knows a lot of guys in the role-playing game industry. He knows Shane Hensley of Pinnacle Entertainment Group. He just knows a lot of people. So when Jack was in charge of Cryptic and they were looking for something to do instead of City of Heroes, famously, City of Heroes was also built by Shane Hensley, head of Pinnacle Entertainment Group, creator of Savage Worlds, as just a fun fact. Anyway, so Jack is like, cool, what are we going to do? We don't want to spend DC and Marvel money. Well, the Champions guys were like, hey, we have this whole setting with all of these characters. They're all built. We all know what they look like, what their histories are, what their powers are. There is a certain inbuilt audience, but maybe not a big one. But hey, you can afford it. And you get all of the work done up front. And Jack was like, good. This sounds like a good deal. It's good for you. It's good for us. That's how Champions Online came to be.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, it gives you the kind of setting where people can make the kind of character they want to play also. Like it's a good way to embody that kind of fantasy.
Yeah,
before the table, right?
Exactly. Before you came online, I was saying that the hero system's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness, in that you can build anything you desire, but if you don't know what you want, that can be a real problem.
Yeah, because not only do you need specific ideas for how you want to bring your character across and to figure out how to do so mechanically, but in the wide world of comic book vibes, like I was saying earlier, you could run basically anything. We've got romantic plots, we've got horror. You can do noir-esque spy thrillers, and like Secret Wars kinds of things, Civil War kind of things. You can have epic galaxy-spanning problems, run comedy games. It really depends on your imagination and your ability to run it at the table. I imagine that like getting everyone who wants to play a quote-unquote superhero game on board with the same tone is kind of a challenge in and of itself. Like even if you have everybody agreeing they want to run something that feels like a standard action-packed issue, like depending on the decades of comics they like, that could feel very different. So
it absolutely can. Some of the issues with Champions is that it largely never really progressed beyond 80s game design. Even today, there is no such thing as a player resource like inspiration from D&D or Benny's from Savage Worlds, which is a staple of modern game design, is having some sort of thing I could spend as a player to do something, right? Despite all the bookkeeping and resources that the game gives you for Hero, there isn't any kind of mechanic like that, which is a shame.
Well, it feels like a shoe-in to have meta points for a game like this, where you're trying to be heroic, right?
Exactly. And this is probably a good time for me to say that there is a spiritual successor that takes all the strengths of the hero system and leaves behind all the weaknesses. That's a game called Prowlers and Paragons, which you can find on DriveThruRPG. Full disclosure, I have also written for this game. I have a villain book for this game that you could buy as well. It's called Enemies Unleashed, and it is a love letter of champions. But Prowlers and Paragons is champions. It's still the big handfuls of dice, but it's very quick character creation. It's still you're building a character that you want, but it doesn't take forever to do it, and there's not a whole lot of advanced math involved. Very little advanced math, in fact. So it's a leaner, meaner, easier to get into version of Champions, Prowlers and Paragons. Go check it out if you're curious, or if you've loved hero games in the past, or if you just want to play a really good, moderate crunch superhero RPG. That's where to go for that, is Prowlers and Paragons. Champions, as I said, is essentially dead and has been dead for years.
R.I.P.
At least since COVID, if not earlier, I would argue. Oh, we've got a comment here from Professor Chap. Like all the alt realities in Marvel, the Terminator, like Days of Future Past. Oh God, Days of Future Past, so awesome. Marvel Noir, 1602, House of M. Yes, so many good ones. Agreed.
Yeah, Spider Noir just came out, right?
Yeah. And Champions in 3D is still a very good source book for superhero role playing in other versions of reality. So I'm gonna put a big gold star on that one. Like, go check that out.
Yeah, I'd imagine a lot of the setting material is cross-compatible, at least, just inspirations for different kinds of energies you can bring to the table, story lines and plot beats you can run, having your party sucked into another dimension, things of this nature.
Hero system tried to be very cinematic. It tried to be very comic book accurate. Like, you had a stat called knockback for combat that you could turn it off if it was street level or pulp or fantasy. But if it was superhero, you would calculate how much the body damage you inflicted, and then the person would have to roll against that to see how far they were smacked by your super powerful punch or by your energy beam, which felt very comic booky. And there were a lot of weird maneuvers you could use. Like, you could they called it a move through, which was you would use your full movement to like ram yourself into an opponent, which would do extra damage to them, but also some damage to you. Things like that, which is a very comic book thing to do as well. Their martial arts system was very strictly defined, but it felt very cool. Like, it felt cool to be a martial artist because you had all these moves that normal warriors just didn't have access to. And the way they wrote a lot of their powers, it felt like it was aiming for a very comic book type realization at the table of what this ability could do. This didn't always work out. Like, the way that mind control worked was actually very almost the opposite of how it works in the comics. Something I hated. I'll give you an example. So mind control in Hero System is all about how high you can roll on the dice versus your opponent's willpower, or ego is what it's called. And the higher result you could get, the more against their character you could get them to act. So most of the time, if you were a character with mind control, you would be trying to get someone to do something that they were largely okay with doing anyway. Like
the subtle influences.
Very, very subtle influence. But that's not comic books, right? In the comic books, if Superman gets mind controlled, he's suddenly robbing a bank, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, what are you doing, Superman?"
Right? He is weak to magic.
Right?
Or like a Starro, where people are being like controlled as zombies in a giant horde.
Right. And unfortunately, Champions just didn't work like that. To get someone to do something that was completely against their character was almost impossible. And anyway, suffice to say, some of the rules just didn't work out real well. Certain concepts were easy to build, so other concepts not so much. It's actually easier to build Martian Manhunter than it is to build Superman. It's easier to build Wonder Woman than it is to build Batman. Building a character like Batman is probably you probably can't afford it. You probably don't have the points.
Well, he is pretty rich.
You definitely don't have the points for Superman. And Rogue as a character, like the X-Men Rogue, almost nearly impossible to build without compromising the concept of what Rogue is actually capable of.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of character creation in Champions was unfortunately about like compromising on the concept. If you wanted to play Superboy, you could play like a pretty weak version of Superboy. You probably couldn't play actual Superboy. And this is yet another reason why it was difficult to get people into the game, because they come in and maybe they did clear that high hurdle of like, okay, I'm going to learn how all this math works and I'm going to learn how to design all of my powers. And then you get to the very end, you get to the finish line, and the guy's like, yeah, you can't actually be Superboy. You can be like Diet Timu, we have Superboy at home.
Well, that's kind of the problem with trying to emulate the genre of comic books in a mechanical way, because your team in a comic book is not balanced. It's just not. Like, I think there's a line where the Martian Manhunter actually says, yeah, Superman does what I do, except stronger and scarier. Because he does. He is tougher.
Well, there's a very popular show on YouTube called Death Battle, and they put characters up against each other, and they've had Superman fight Goku 3 times to make it very, very clear Superman is just that freaking strong, yo.
He is that guy.
Well, the joke I like to give is that if you ever tune into Death Battle and if it's any random comic book character, if that comic book character is from the Silver Age, they're almost certainly going to win, because Silver Age comic books were so freaking wild. That's the era in which Superman was like juggling planets and like blowing out suns and shit like that. So the Captain Marvel, not Carol Danvers, but Shazam Captain Marvel, once punched a black hole into existence during the Silver Age, as an example.
Yeah, all right.
It gets wild. It gets insane. But yeah, I mean, I have a shrine 4th edition Champions up in my office. I wish I could show it to you. It's just those are some of my favorite books, and they're so well done. Did you said you played 4th edition, or you were interested in 4th edition?
I've read 4th edition, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Has one of the greatest examples of play, in my opinion. I don't know if you remember the example of play.
Not on the top of my head. It was a while back. I wanted to play this, but I couldn't get anybody to, because it was 120 pages of character creation.
So the example of play is intentionally silly. It is very, very Silver Agey, in that the supervillain has unleashed his genetically enhanced giant turkey named Gobbler onto the interstate. And your superhero's girlfriend, Nell, is in fact trapped in traffic as Gobbler is rampaging across the bridge full of cars. So you have to save Nell and stop Gobbler in time, which I always thought was hilarious.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Although I think the example characters, the quote unquote champions team, or the champions as they're known in the universe, is one of my favorite group of heroes, including some very strange choices, but they're charming nonetheless. There's a character called Obsidian, who is the example Brick, the really strong tough guy. He's an alien prince made out of black stone. He's basically, what if the Thing, but also Black Panther from outer space.
I recall him fighting Blobbo.
And there's a Quasar, who is like, what if Captain Marvel, she can fly and do energy blasts. And she has a handicapped brother in high school that she's doing all this to try. She's trying to find a cure for his condition. There's Solitaire, who is the Scarlet Witch equivalent, basically. Like she has a lot of mental and magical abilities, and she has a tiny little object called a widget that floats around with her And as long as the widget is near her, her powers cost less endurance than usual. It was an example of a focus, okay, which made that made her abilities cheaper because it had a disadvantage. Then there's Defender, who is essentially Iron Man. Like, what if Iron Man, but also a movie star? And possibly my favorite character is Seeker. Seeker was on almost every single cover of 4th edition, and he was almost always getting his ass kicked. Seeker was a blonde Australian ninja, like what if Shang-Chi but Crocodile Dundee? And his powers were, I'm a super martial artist with throwing stars and like size. He was very Ninja Turtle-y, you know, but a guy from Australia. Struth.
Very cool. Very cool.
Struth indeed.
Struth.
I think those are the main characters of the Champions team.
I remember Eurostar, the villainous team, being mentioned.
Yes.
Some content. There was like this European bad guy squad.
Actually, that was one of the things they did very well. Is a lot of their villain teams were like frighteningly strong. Yeah, Eurostar was like what if Justice League, but bad guys from Europe, and some of them were scary strong indeed.
As they should be.
Which I like. I like that you had villains that were pushovers, you know, like, oh no, we're fighting Bulldozer again. You could have pushovers, but you could also have like, holy shit, it's Eurostar, everybody run. Something that's a little weird about Champions, and this is just a feature. I wouldn't call it a feature. This is just a bug that languished far too long. It was very easy to pick disadvantages for your powers that would never actually come up in play. And I'm sure you're wondering what I mean by that. All right. I played several characters who were battlesuit users, like Iron Man. One of my characters was called Technicality, she was a lawyer, and
nice.
Her husband had designed a power suit and got killed by the Syndicate, and she put his killers on trial, and they got off on a technicality, which is, you know, hence the name. But the thing about power armor suited characters is you could get a decent discount on all of your abilities, because all of your abilities, all your powers, you know, come from the suit. And the issue is that a game master had to be pretty proactive about involving your disadvantages, or else they just would never be an issue. And I played Technicality for quite a while, like I want to say it was like over a year of standard play. I never once, not one single time, did not have access to my battle suit. And so I saved a whole bunch of points. I had a character who was just more efficient in every way, because the game master never used that against me. Never once was like, oh, hey, you know, you're too far away from your suit, or somebody damaged your suit, or somebody's hacking your suit. You know, there's a lot of issues that come up for Iron Man, you know, in the movies and in the cartoons and things that he's available from. And Champions was one of those games where the game master really had to be on the ball. He had to know that you were being hunted by Mech Assassin, or that you were being watched by Venom, which is their version of Hydra, or that you know, had your dear old Aunt May who was sick in the hospital. The game just did not allow the player to really have any impact or agency on the aspects of the character that should be coming up in play.
Well, yeah, like what if you had a kryptonite allergy, but nobody could find any, right?
Right. Yes, exactly that. 150% that.
Well, the alternative is everybody has kryptonite, which also could happen.
Well, there's a difference between something coming up every 3 or 4 games and something that never comes up at all.
Yeah.
And there were also ways to build your character. We talked about the frameworks earlier on of ways to get your powers more cheaply are through power frameworks, and the power frameworks were so good. I found myself, especially in the later years of the 6th edition years of Champions, 5th and 6th edition, I ended up making characters that were basically Swiss Army knives. I had an answer to just about any problem because I had built my character so efficiently. I was like, oh, if I need a movement power, okay, I've got a movement power. If I need an attack power, I've got an attack power. If I need a defense power, I've got that too. And it was all like things that fit the concept of the character, but it made for a, unfortunately, pretty boring play. Like I love the idea of superheroes. I hate the idea of a superhero who has an answer for every single problem. Now, granted, I mean, that is kind of the Superman issue, right? Like he has an answer for just about every problem. Batman has an answer for just about every single problem. But in most cases, when you're reading a Superman story or a Batman story, the author has cleverly played upon the issues those characters have to deal with. Like, can I punch Superman and the girlfriend? Because Lois Lane doesn't have superpowers. If Batman doesn't have prep time, etc. There's ways to challenge those things that come up in a story, in a narrative that doesn't require interaction from a player. But when the game master's running the game, the Champions and Hero System just did not really offer you any tools as a game master to tug on those strings, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting case of very heavy crunch and then demanding that you get really creative narratively outside of that to make things run and work properly. Like, because the frameworks, I believe, were attempts to make it possible to play characters like Superman or like Storm from the X-Men, who can just do a lot of stuff. But when you have characters like that in the same party as characters who are built to be a little more grounded, like your Daredevil-esque guys, you need to figure out narratively how okay you are with imbalance, how you want to challenge those characters, which is sort of the ongoing problem in comic books. Like the legacy of power scaling and death battle-esque things kind of stems from the challenge of making these very powerful characters feel threatened when they're on the same team as guys who are maybe not as able to stand up to the living sun,
I do want to take a moment to just admire how awesome a character Storm is, especially X-Men 97 or X-Men 90s series Storm. She just sounds like a goddess. I just love her so much. This I command. Like she literally, she should be a weather goddess, and she sounds like one, which I really dig. All right. So what are some other things you'd like to discuss about the hero system? It's a min-maxer's game, but there's no min. Says Aeromov. I mean, if you buy your speed up really high, you're on the right track. Buy your powers with 0 endurance cost, or get the way to min-max champions is to basically take as many disadvantages as possible that will never come up in game. I mean,
my psychological limitation is I get really pissed off when I'm losing.
Yeah, I mean, and there's been some real abusive builds.
Wow.
So infamously, buying bases is fairly cheap, and especially buying real estate for your base is very cheap. So it was easy to make a character called the Landlord who literally owned every inch of soil on the earth. For example,
the ultimate villain.
You could make a character whose powers only work at the center of the universe, except for teleport, which only works outside the center of the universe. You see how that could be really bad. Oh, there were just some power combinations that were outright just broken. Shrinking plus super strength plus teleport. And you would just be this invisible tiny guy beating the shit out of everyone because they didn't know where you were. They couldn't hit you even if they did know where you were. And then you could reposition yourself right behind somebody for the extra bonuses for an unaware target pretty easily.
Because you remember all of this stuff's a hex system.
Yeah. It gets kind of crazy. It got crazy. It's a setting. It's a system that I love, but I haven't played it in years, and and anytime any of my group like talks about playing it again, I'm like, yeah, I'd like to play Champions. And then like 2 minutes later, I'm like, actually, I don't think I do.
Oh no.
There's this game I love, but I'm like, I don't really want to play it anymore. It's too complicated. It's too easy to break. It's too easy to make characters that are that don't really have anything to challenge you with. And I'd much rather play Prowlers and Paragons these days than I would ever want to pick up another Champions book.
When we're talking complexity, I assume there are more like power descriptions and such in the splat books of the game.
Oh, well, yes.
So I've read the core book, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, Hero System 4th edition Champions had something like 50 or 60 different skills.
Yes.
5th and 6th edition had hundreds of skills. And just as for an example, like in most superhero games, you know, I want to play a lawyer from Hell's Kitchen who's also a really badass martial artist. Okay. To be a lawyer is usually like one skill. Law or, you know, lawyering or something like that, right? Just it's one skill, make a roll, see how good of a lawyer you are. In Champions though, you have to have a knowledge skill in the law, a professional skill as a lawyer.
Right.
You have to have oratory as a skill, like being able to make a good argument. And there's probably like 3 or 4 more skills on top of that. And they broke stealth into just 3 different skills. There was shadowing, like I want to follow someone without being noticed. There was actual stealth, which is I don't want you to notice me being here. And then there was like sleight of hand, which is I want you to not notice me doing something with my hands. And that's
so
there was, yeah.
This is the dark cousin of how I like separating visual perception and auditory perception. Where you need some megazord of skills to make one career, which is that is simulationist. That is kind of how it works. Yes, you do need to also be good at research and speaking to be a good lawyer. But when all of those skills have an XP cost, perhaps it is a little bit less fun to build that out.
In 4th edition, I actually really liked the super granular skills. I liked having a smart character who had knowledge skills in theoretical physics and like energy sources and alien civilizations. And, you know, it made you feel like you were a really smart guy if you had a bunch of skills that were in very specific things. But it got awkward when you're like, okay, I'm a really good acrobat, so I have a very strong acrobatic skill. But if I want to roll with a punch, I have to use the breakfall skill instead, or I'd have to use climbing to actually climb something rather than acrobat my way up. It got, again, this was a game that took a lot of time at the table because you had to look up what each skill did and didn't do, or you had to have a really strong knowledge of what each skill did or didn't do. Okay, so I do want to talk about one of my favorite mechanics.
Please, yeah.
There is a thing that the champion system did or the hero system did, that I've never seen replicated as well in anything else. And that's the thing called the presence.
Hello?
Yes.
One of your favorite mechanics?
Yes, sorry.
I'm intrigued. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. It's called the presence attack.
Yes.
Now, can you define this? Can you talk about this?
I cannot off the top of my head.
Okay. So the presence attack was, instead of fighting someone, instead of doing a blast or something, on your turn, you could take an action and do something really, really cool. Okay. And the presence attack, this was, you could intimidate, you could awe, you could emotionally overwhelm other beings rather than inflicting physical damage. This was, you could think of it as a super powerful intimidation roll or a super powerful diplomacy roll in another game. It was a quote unquote like a social shockwave. It's probably the best way I could put it. So you wouldn't roll the hit, you wouldn't roll any damage. Instead, you would Yeah, aura farming. Yes, thank you. Yes, yes. This is what it is. Presence. I've never seen any other game do this, so it's really awesome. But basically, if you did something really cool, like use a power in a very impressive way, and then had a soliloquy of some kind, you had to speak. And the game master would award you extra dice based on how impressive the action you were, the thing you did, and how good your soliloquy was. So you could actually get a whole bunch of dice just by being really creative about like I want to do a really impressive thing, and I want to say a really impressive thing along with it. And then you take that big batch of dice and you'd roll it and you compare it to everybody else's ego that was an NPC. Not player characters would make up their own minds, but uh, NPCs could be completely overawed. They could flee. They could drop their stuff. They could change their minds. You could literally rethink your entire life choices moments. And that is very comic booky.
So what's fantastic about this is that it would work for running. This is one of very few systems I've ever seen that would work for running a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure game, because you can
right?
point at somebody and say, "Your next line will be."
It was one of my favorite things to do because it was just so creative, and I liked the quote unquote report card you would get from the game master about how cool what you had done, because they literally would give you a number of dice equal to what they think you deserved for your effort. It was a moment in game where you could literally say, I'm going to do a thing. Now, how cool did you think that thing was on a scale of 1 to 10?
Big puppy dog eyes. How cool was I? Was it cool?
Yeah, I mean, it feels Mother May I, like talking about it right now. It feels very Mother May I. At the table, though, it was far more cinematic and far more immersive because it flowed. It flowed from like how well you knew your character, how well the other players knew your character, how well the game master knew your character, whether or not you were doing something that fit the vibe of the scene, because that was one of the ways you could get dice was, does it fit the vibe of the scene?
Mm-mm.
And it also hinged off of your ability to say something very comic booky at the moment. you know Ultron, we would have words with thee, as you smash through the wall with your Uru hammer and stand there floating above the rubble holding Mjolnir while lightning strikes the hammer in your hand. That's a presence attack.
So cool.
And you could like mechanically, you might even stop his robot army for a few seconds since they all like sit there and process that. They're like, oh, holy shit.
They were programmed with this little aura.
That's the power of a presence attack. That's what made presence attacks really, really fun. And that's one of my favorite mechanics of the hero system.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool stuff. The fact that it emulates all of these individual comic book beats is so sick. It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat.
Would you like to read this chat here?
Yes, with a lot of tabletop RPGs, the DM says, you're a bunch of weirdos, but I'll make you into big damn heroes. But in this, it's what? They're already heroes. Make you into big weirdos. I've found the players will often do this on their own. But
That's true. He's not wrong though. And presence attacks could go poorly. Number one, if you wanted to do one, but you just couldn't pull off the description very well, that was a problem. And also the dice could just absolutely screw you. You could narrate the coolest goddamn thing anybody at the table's ever heard and then roll nothing but once. And the villain just goes, yeah, okay, and now what?
Brutal.
Yeah, that would be pretty brutal. It would be bad. But yeah, goddamn, was it fun.
It's so awesome.
To this day, when I'm playing a superhero game, like I will often like try to take at least one turn in combat and do nothing offensively except do something amazing and make a cool speech, just because I've like been trained to do that.
I feel like that should be encouraged in a lot of games.
Emotional crits, as Lich Lord cares. Yeah, that's not a bad way to think of it. All right. So yeah, if you want to model a very specific or unusual character, Hero System is excellent. Great toolkit. If you enjoy crunchy point-buy system mastery, if you like being that guy who knows exactly what he's doing, this game is excellent for that. If you want cinematic superheroes or high-power superhero games, Champions is excellent at that. But if you want to onboard a player quickly, if you want to have a casual superhero game, just sit down and play beer and pretzels, this is not that. This is not that.
I feel like even the hex grid, you're hard pressed to get away with that.
It also lacks a lot of plug and play adventures. Fourth edition had the most plug and play adventures of any of their editions, but they just struggled with that as time went on. And it is not light rules. It is not quick play. This is there's a lot of resolution off of any particular roll. And there are ways, like it's in many ways it's counterintuitive, right? Because it's roll under for all your skill checks, all your task resolution is roll under. But if you want to see how well you did, like how powerful was that attack? That's add up. It's higher numbers are good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also confusing because there's multiple different types of damage. There's killing damage and regular damage. But regular damage can kill you, and killing damage can just knock you out, depending on how the dice rolls. That can be counterintuitive.
Right.
The way that different defenses work. Because you had physical defense, you had energy defense, you had mental defense, you had power defense. And what the hell is power defense, Vera? You're probably wondering.
Defense against powers.
Right. Like, okay, so if I'm playing the parasite, right? And I come up to you and touch you, and I'm draining your energy, like I'm literally making you weak and making me strong. Power defense would work against that. Not physical defense.
But it's very yucky, so I need mental defense also.
I mean, certain versions of the parasite, yeah. It's a very weird system in that it just has all these different resources. If I want to get knocked out, it's how much stun do I have. If I don't want to die, it's how much body do I have. If I don't want to get mind controlled, it's how much ego I have. Do I want to do things? I have to have endurance to do things. I have to have speed to do things more often. I have to have dexterity is your initiative stat. So the higher dexterity, the faster you go, the more often you go first. And in editions before 6th edition, there were things called secondary characteristics as well. So if you bought a high amount of strength in 1st through 5th edition, that would also give you the following things: extra physical defense, extra stun, extra body, and it would determine how far you could jump. If you want to do like a really long jump, if you were super strong, you didn't have to buy the leaping power. It was just part of your strength.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the idea is to differentiate different styles of characters that are strong against different threats, right?
It kind of locked people in, though, into certain roles. Champions was one of the first games to say, like, okay, bricks are a certain type of superhero. They're really strong, really tough. Blasters, right? The Thing. Here's the thing.
So here's the thing.
I literally wish I had a Thing action figure I could hold up when I say here's the thing.
I have a button for it at home, but I'm traveling.
Oh no. Blasters, you had a ranged attack of some kind of energy type. Mentalists, you had some kind of mental ability. Martial artists, Champions was one of those games where it actually took different types of characters and separated them out into categories. It was one of the first superhero games to do this. And during the 4th and 5th edition eras, and 6th edition, I think, maybe, they also had specific source books. They had like the ultimate skill, the ultimate speedster, the ultimate martial artist, the ultimate blaster, things like that. That if you were a character of that type, you could buy a source book and find all kinds of new and interesting ways to use your abilities, which was really fun. I actually really like that. I've always wanted to write the ultimate power armor. Like that's something I've always wanted to do, is write that book. And the guys that made Champions, they did think about comics. They thought about comics very deeply. Aaron Alston, very famously in his book Strike Force, which was for 3rd edition Champions, and then of course I was one to help to make the 6th edition version. In his book Strike Force, he's very clear about like, you know, let's try and mimic stuff from the comics, not just the storylines, but like the soap opera vibes. Let's try
Yes.
and mimic the, you know, like let's have a cool team maneuver that we do. Like, you know, the fastball special from X-Men is a cool team maneuver. Let's come up with our own. And let's have lots of really cool subplots and altered dimensions and alien invasions. And they thought deeply about comics. They thought about how to bring a lot of this stuff in. Now, I don't know if you were here for this, but earlier on, I was saying that there was a period of time where Iron Crown Enterprises published Champions. This is the 4th edition era. And the lead editor on that line was Monty Cook, who, of course, would go on to design 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons. Monty Cook told me to my face that 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons was built on a lot of the bones of Champions.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you want to talk about levels of crunch, like we covered D&D not too long ago, I can see we were comparing certain breakdowns like skill systems just a minute ago. I can see the lineage. I can see the lineage.
So that's just a fun fact in case anybody was like, oh, hey, Monty Cook, you know, was there any influence? There definitely was. Yeah, I don't know. Champions went through some weird periods. You were not here earlier, but I talked about how there was a company called Cyber Games that bought up a bunch of properties, including Champions and Arduin Grimoire and Savage Worlds, and they went under and took a lot of those games with them. And like Champions was basically out of the picture for like 5 years because of that. R. Telsorian made their own version of Champions called the Fusion System, which used Interlock as the basis, which was kind of interesting. And of course, there's the Champions Online, which is now the main way people know about Champions is through the MMO.
Like my avenue to this is playing City of Heroes private servers a long time ago.
Joe says, honestly, it makes total sense considering dexterity leads into sleight of hand, but you can still not be very good at it. I mean, yeah, there's justifications for those things for sure, but it just the skill bloat is real. There is a book called The Ultimate Skill, and it is just it's like 300 pages of different ways to use skills, and the skill list alone in 5th edition is, I want to say, like 50 or 60 entries. It's way too long. There were knowledge skills, professional skills. They had combat skill levels, which were like, I get extra bonus points to a particular type of attack or a particular group of weapons. And you could use your combat skill levels not only for attack, but also for damage. And it got really wild. Like I said, stealth was broken down into 3 different things, which is weird to me. Being a lawyer took like 5 or 6 different skills. Acrobatics and breakfall were 2 separate skills that did separate things. And that's not even counting things like, you know, boating, piloting, driving. God, there's so many. I've been out of it for a while. But one of the things I really admired about 5th edition D&D was the very tight yet broad rules, the skill system. You know, there's only like 12 or 14 skills, I think, in 5th edition, but they're all very broad, and they all work really, really well.
Yeah, like I would say that this is definitely a simulation of school design, right? Where they're trying to independently figure out every variety of permutation of thing you might need to really be that character, which is cool. But you know,
well, in editions prior to 5th edition, they had a stat called comeliness that determined how physically attractive you were. You had perks like diplomatic immunity that you could buy, or license to kill, or you know, not really powers, but kind of like powers. I'm rich. I own a base. I have a jet. I have a international driver's license. I have a CDL. I have, world renown as a professor of biology. These are all things you could buy as part of your character. And there is a certain satisfaction in accurately modeling every little detail of a character.
Of course, yeah.
That was the mini game of building your character in Hero System. Also, I admired the way that you got creative with some of your abilities if you wanted to simulate certain things. Like if you wanted to be, one of the problems with champions is that you really couldn't be immune to anything. All right. Like if you wanted to be immune to fire, my character is literally immune to fire. There's not a power called immunity. There's just defenses. But you could get creative. So there was a power called D-Solid, right? D-Solid is I can phase through solid matter. Solid matter phases through me. While I am D-Solid, I cannot be hurt with physical things. Okay. So you could buy the power D-Solid and define it as I'm immune to fire. This only works against fire, and fire does not pass through me. It hits me and just stops because I'm immune.
I see. So you can be less solid by desoliding.
Sort of. It was a weird way to build immunity to fire, but it was kind of interesting in how you did it. My former roommate, Grady Elliott, was excellent at this. Like he would make a character who was just like super adept at dodging shit. So he had this power called, super dodge, and defined it as I can dodge just about anything. And it was the mechanics of it. He was D-Solid to everything except area effect attacks. So he's literally a super dodger in that he could dodge any individual thing. But if you pick up a car and huck it at him, that anything that fills the whole hex he's in, he's like, oh crap, I can't dodge that. It's too big.
I see.
Right. I like that. I like that you could get very granular. You could get very creative with it. But that only really happened if you were patient enough to master the system, if you were willing to wade into 500 pages of a role-playing game.
But it's rewarding. Like, I like crunchy systems. I veer toward things that have this kind of setup, which is why I wanted to play this, right? But it is easier said than done to get people to fully invest in this level of complexity.
Well, Sir Michael Serbrook, my friend, and we've had many, many discussions on like how to modernize champions. One of the first things that I would recommend is getting rid of as much bookkeeping as possible. There's only one type of damage. There's not two types of damage. There's, get rid of endurance entirely. Maybe keep body and stun separate just for flavor, but and then introduce some sort of mechanic like a hero point or a something like a Benny or inspiration that a player can use to add a bonus to their roll or something. I would change the roll under to roll over just to make everything like high numbers good. It's so much easier to train people when they know that all the numbers should go up. That's why FACO is no longer a roll under. It is D&D got smart about that in 3rd edition.
Yeah, well, there is a reason for this.
But there are so many really good products in the Champions lineup. They have some of the best villain books in the world. Like if you're looking for really cool villains to throw at your superheroes, go grab a Champions Enemies book, because some of them are solid as hell. And they had some really good. They did have some really good adventures. They also had some really good source books, like we talked about. Aaron Alston worked on one called The Blood and Dr. McQuark, which is just an excellent game system. Basically, if you ever wanted to smash Amber, the Chronicles of Amber, into a role-playing game, that's The Blood. They are this race of extra-dimensional demigods, basically, who like to occasionally interbreed with humans, and they have like this whole dynastic Game of Thrones struggle going on, and their shadow dimension beyond our own. It's pretty rad. It's wild.
Okay.
And it was also the very first game to ever do things like they had a book called Normals Unbound. And Normals Unbound was literally just a book of NPCs that were not supervillains and not superheroes. It's like, hey, do you need a disabled sidekick for your character? Here's a guy. How about a truck driver? Here's a guy. And he had a whole story, and he had a whole motivation, and he had a whole character sheet with all the write-ups and everything involved. It was a book of everybody from a beat cop all the way down to like a sanitation worker. And it was just fantastic. Like that's a hell of a supplement for a superhero role-playing game. because you could literally pluck anyone out of obscurity and using normals abound, and they have a whole backstory and way to get plugged in.
Hey, get Jimmy Olsen in there. Perfect.
Okay, I do see one I want to comment. I want to address your Full Metal Dragon. Great name, by the way, and I love your avatar. You're describing Mutants and Masterminds. I'm really not. I've played Mutants and Masterminds, and I played Champions. I see where you're coming from, Full Metal Dragon, but I can assure you with some authority that they play very, very, very differently, and the character builds are very, very, very different. When I'm describing like what I think is a modern version of Champions, I'm really describing Prowlers and Paragons to be, and I encourage you to check it out so that you can see the difference between Mutants and Masterminds and Prowlers and Paragons. But good point. There is a guy named Steve Kenson who is possibly the greatest superhero RPG designer of all time. Steve has been around a long time. He works primarily for Green Ronin, so he has done a whole lot of Mutants and Masterminds, but he's also worked on Icons and Masks and a few other superhero role-playing games. And he worked with me when we worked on Aaron Alston's book. So Steve Kenson, the designer of Mutants and Masterminds, is also a big fan of Champions. And ask him about it, too, because he'll tell you. Metallica Moe, I think.
Hell yeah.
Do you want to read this one?
Yeah, hey Ross and Vera just got off work. How would you compare Hero to Mutants and Masterminds? Because the Mutants and Masterminds is a well-known game in this genre, for sure. He says, I want to start a superhero campaign and having trouble picking a system.
I wholeheartedly recommend Prowlers and Paragons, drive-through RPG. Just go grab it. Mutants and Masterminds is a good game, but it is also built on the bones of D20, and there's a certain vibe that comes to D20 games, and Mutants and Masterminds is not immune to it. You essentially make saving throws to resist damage and things like that. It can get a little weird for me. Let's just put it that way. I enjoy Mutants and Masterminds, and it is a good game if you do want to start a casual play. If you just want to, if it is very plug and play, it's very easy to get people to the table to play Mutants and Masterminds and get started quickly. But that's also true of Prowlers and Paragons, and I feel like Prowlers is just a little bit more reflective of a comic book accurate experience. So
I would say Hero is the crunchiest option. That's going to be I would say that's going to be a battle to get people invested in the campaign. If they're like super crunchy players and they want to sit down for it and are locked in, absolutely. But yeah,
I honestly wish we were in a position in a timeline where Champions was still a going concern, where Champions was still a living game. And in that case, I would say, yeah, go try out Champions. Why not? You could go buy it. Well, you really can't. It's very difficult to find a Champions book on a game store shelf these days because it's been dead for quite a while. And we are basically discussing a game in the cemetery with a headstone. At this point, we are not talking about an ongoing game. So rest in peace, Champions. You will be missed, but your time is over.
Rip.
Yeah, it was a very 80s design. It was very simulationist. It was very, very crunchy. But it could be a hell of a lot of fun. And I will say again, Dark Champions is a super fun way to play the game. I should probably describe that more in depth, like what is Dark Champions? Because I did briefly cover it. We got Exiled One, member for 6 months. I made it. Can I make an undead hero? You absolutely can. Yes, Champions hero system, you can make an undead guy, no problem. No problem. Some game systems have trouble with undead characters, like infamously Savage Worlds, like way overvalues being undead. And so if you make a character who has undead-like traits, that is like the majority of your points for your species, because that all gets eaten up by being undead, quote unquote. But Champions is like, no, it's fine. You can just you can hand wave a lot of that stuff with the idea of special effects, and actually like not breathing and not aging are very cheap and easy to do in Champions, surprisingly. So Dark Champions. What is Dark Champions? Dark Champions is
edgy.
What if I described this earlier as what if Batman the Animated Series, but way more violence and dark. It is street level superheroes, and the specific version of Dark Champions that the hero system likes to cover is very much like a Punisher comic, very much like a gritty street level adventure. There is no Iron Man, and if you have a suit of power armor, it is like the very clunkiest, barely bulletproof version. Batman and the Punisher and Daredevil, like this is where they live, and even then it's a very different version of Batman. You know, it's probably Dark Knight Returns Batman, I guess. But it's also great if you want to do like Kraven the Hunter versus Spider-Man. If you want to do like the Injustice Gang or the Royal Flush Gang, I should say. If you want to do like the Royal Flush Gang versus the Teen Titans, Dark Champions is a good way to do it. And there is a certain value in like, I want to play a guy that would hang out with the Punisher as opposed to a guy that would hang out with Superman. It's mostly martial arts, mostly guns, mostly cool, flashy, katanas and shotguns and trench coats, but also the occasional Casey Jones with his bag full of hockey sticks and baseball bats and stuff like that. Yeah, Casey Jones is a great Dark Champions character.
And you could run like the Watchmen in this, right?
Yeah, you could. You absolutely could do Watchmen. The majority. So take all the Watchmen except for Dr. Manhattan. That's Dark Champions. That's a really good way to think of it.
And then Dr. Manhattan is a broken character, very hard to make in the system.
Yeah. Lorebeards,
he's God.
The Wrestling Theater. That's another great name. He asks, stream on R. Telsorian's interlock system when? I'd love to see you tackle Mechton and Cyberpunk. Bro, me too. I want to do that.
Interesting. We can talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, oh God, Vera. Mechton is a beautiful thing. Cyberpunk's a beautiful thing. Cyber Generation is one of my like white whales. I've always wanted to play Cyber Generation. Interlock is really interesting as a system. It's very cool.
It is on my list of games I'm curious about but haven't played.
I have not played nearly as much as I'd like to. I've played some, but not nearly as much as I'd like to.
We are going to do some polls this season.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. I'd like to do Ironclaw, if you're familiar with Ironclaw.
Not at all.
Made would be a fun one to put on the list.
Made, I know.
Slay Industries, Aces and Eights. We could talk about Feng Shui. God, I want to talk about Feng Shui so bad. Hong Kong Action Theater.
These might pair well with like Wuinmon, which is a game that I quite like, but it's very complicated. Also, like super crunchy, like poetic, similar vibe, similar genre. Weapons
of the Gods. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of really interesting games out there. Thanks for that. The Wrestling Theater. we definitely need to start putting polls up.
Thank you.
Vera, if you're okay with it, I know you've got some people lined up and we want to get them on the show. But if you want me to start putting up some polls, I know how to do that, and I can certainly do that. Yeah, let's discuss what'll go in the first poll after this. We might delay the voted for one if we get like somebody on, because like I've got a couple of people who are hoping to make appearances, but we can schedule around that. Yeah. Ice Veins asks, could Dr. Manhattan defeat Superman? Ooh, I mean, do we consider unmaking things a magical power? Yeah. Like at the height of his power, Superman, probably not. Like typical Superman in the comics, Dr. Manhattan could probably win because he's basically a god. Yeah, he unravels existence, and Superman is notoriously weak against like magic and whatnot. It's his one like weakness. This isn't kryptonite. It's like magical things, hypnosis. But Dr. Manhattan is not magical. Like that's where it becomes interesting, because Dr. Manhattan is absolutely not magic. It's like sufficiently advanced technology. Yeah, but he's grasping the connections of the universe and twisting them. Like he's touching things, but it's science at such a level that it's basically magic without actually being magic. You know? because it's quantum, it's entanglements, it's like, you know, muons and all the various subatomic particles. That guy is capable of creating entire universes out of string theory and chaos, and you know, it's all math, it's all science, but it is just at such a level that it's essentially magic.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
right? Like it makes you want it. That's a fascinating question, I think. Fascinating question. And they're also theater. Since you were talking about the hero system, do you remember Fusion? Yes. Yes, I did talk about Fusion, but I can talk about it some more now. Fusion was, as the Rational Theater says here, it was R. Telsorian's attempt at merging Interlock with Hero. It was called Champions of the New Millennium, was the era. This would be the early 2000s. And Fusion was unfortunately sufficiently different enough from how Champions used to work that most Champions players didn't want to get involved with it. And it was sufficiently alien to most Interlock players that most Interlock players didn't want to deal with it either. It exists as a fascinating snapshot of game design of that era. And Maximum Mike Pondsmith, who's one of the most visionary game designers of my generation, he liked to try out different things. And Interlock was fascinating. We did not give it a chance. That was the problem. I believe it's actually quite good. I never gave it a chance. Nobody wanted to try it. But it's fascinating. It also, that era was also, as I mentioned earlier, was also when they came out with a lot of source books for different anime, including the Bubblegum Crisis role-playing game and source book, which are excellent if you are a fan of Bubblegum Crisis.
Oh, yeah.
Check those out. Yeah, Necron level technology. Thank you. Yes, nice. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He has Necron level tech. It's essentially magic without actually being magic. Yeah, are you familiar with, you're not familiar with Fusion or the Champions New Millennium era at all, are you?
Not particularly, no.
It was wild. It was wild. Fusion was approaching, Fusion was a system that approached the mechanics very similar to how Champions approached it, where it was like build the thing you want in the way that you want. But it was trying to do it in a more rules-light fashion. It was trying to do it in a more character-forward fashion. I don't think it was described very well. I remember being kind of confused when I read it. But I also really liked the possibilities that it had. It's one of those things I wish, looking back, I'm like, man, I wish I'd have played more Interlock, more Fusion specifically. I think Fusion was also, did they use it for Mechton at one point? I don't recall. It's interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up. What else? Is there something you'd like to say about Champions or the hero system?
Well, largely that I'm a fan. I mean, I'm big into like the superhero scene. I've read a lot of like comics, as I've said, and it's fun to have systems that evoke this. Like I've wanted to play in a similar game for a while. This is one of a few games where it's possible to build out the kind of diverse power sets the characters like Venom have, things that I like. So
Venom is
there's a lot there to like.
Build. Yeah, Venom's an interesting build for sure. And Lord Wrestling Theater says, I'm still hoping Maximum Mike can hop into either Rookery or Lorebeards. God, I have interviewed him. I interviewed him on a podcast for several years ago. I'd love to have to talk to him again because he is astonishingly visionary. Maximum Mike has tried a lot of things that have worked. He's tried a lot of things that have not worked. And he's, again, one of the most accomplished independent game designers of all time, because one of his role-playing games became one of the biggest video games of all time, that being Cyberpunk 2077. So Fusion also had a very lightweight stat block format. It was something called Instant Fusion that they approached with. And it used a stat plus skill plus a D10 versus a target number as the core mechanic. And characters, it was in the same spirit as the hero system and the Interlock system, but it was very streamlined for that. The Instant Fusion really compressed down So champions in the hero system has around a dozen primary stats.
Mhm.
Not 6, a dozen. Strength, dex, constitution, body, I think. Then there was intelligence, ego, presence, and physical defense, energy defense, speed, stun. Those were all stats. And in Instant Fusion, they shrunk a lot of that down. It became a very simple stat block you could refer to things with. Like I said, it was a really interesting way to take what was already a very complex system and make it more modular, but still generic, still something that could mimic a lot of different types of genres at once. Yeah, it was very cool. It was a late 90s experiments in making a shared universal engine that could be adopted by multiple companies. Hero is that front runner in terms of a universal game system. It was one of the first, and it was one of the ones that tried to reinvent itself multiple times. Pretty wild.
Pretty cool stuff.
But most people consider the interlock diffusions to be a detour from both interlock and hero that very few people wanted to try, which is a shame. Now, Champions was not the only game that the hero system produced. It's just the most well-known. There was Cyber Hero, Space Hero, Fantasy Hero, Western Hero, which I love. I desperately want to do a Western role-playing game. And no, not Deadlands. I don't want zombies. I want straight up Wild West. Aces and Eights does exist, but I would love to see something better. There was an old D20 product called Sidewinder. I actually worked on one of the early editions of Sidewinder. There's a new edition of Sidewinder that's out now from Carl Kiesler, I believe, and it's pretty cool. That might be like one of the first places I would go if I was going to do a Wild West game. But Fantasy Hero was surprisingly popular. A lot of people wanted to do fantasy and not do D&D. They wanted to do something else. And the hero system was good for that. And one of the things that it allowed for that D&D really didn't is it had a lot of different subsystems that appeal to people. Like if you want to play a monk in D&D, that's cool, but you're really just reskinning your damage. That it's the same damage a sword does, right? It's just I'm doing it with my hand. And
well, it's almost the opposite here, where you've got your killing moves for hand-to-hand combat that then make your hand-to-hand techniques function as regular weapons. It's the opposite design philosophy.
Yeah, you could get very crunchy. So you could have a character who, like for example, my favorite character from Fantasy Hero was a staff wielder, and I made a character who was literally like, I'm a martial artist with a staff, and that's what I do. But it allowed me to be a frontline fighter as opposed to like your typical monk being a more hit and run or flanker style of combatant. And being able to create your own spells was good, but also, just required you to do, if you wanted to have more than 5 spells, that's a lot of work. Actually, even 5 spells alone is actually a pretty decent amount of work. If you want to come up with like one for attack, one for defense, one for movement, one for, finding out information, that's 4 right off the bat. That's, I don't know. You would get bogged down in the minutia. But if you wanted to play like a all men at arms party, or an all thief party, or a mix of men at arms and thieves, and maybe the occasional bard, that was actually really, really, really good in Fantasy Hero. The downside, of course, was just the amount of prep work that the game master had to do. And man, I remember the last Fantasy Hero game I was in was super fun for us. The game master always looked like he was having an aneurysm.
Well, there's so much back end work, right? Like if you're making NPCs and so on, if you're going to set up everybody's characters. Yup.
Not just the NPCs, but the magic items and the spells and the. It was so much work. Dear Lord. These games tried to support you. The source books like Cyber Hero, they did try and give you like, here's a set of cyberware, here's a bunch of combat programs, here's cars and bikes and cool guns. But the fact is, you can only do so much in a single product, and there was nowhere near the level of third party support you would get out of something like D&D or a dedicated game like Shadowrun. It just became a thing where you're like, yes, you can do it in Hero, but why? Why? How is Hero superior to the thing you're not doing? Became like the harder question to answer.
Well, this is the natural problem with the system that tries to do everything, right? Is that you are a generalist, you have to do like additional work to really evoke any specific thing you want to bring across, then balancing it's an issue. It's inevitable. There's no way around it structurally.
Yeah, I think so. I think that is the takeaway from Heroes. It was very ambitious. It tried very, very hard, but ultimately failed and died. It went through several hands. It started out at Hero Games, then went to Iron Crown, then went to Cyber Games, then went to DOJ, and 4 different owners tried to make this game work. Arguably, 4th and 6th edition are the best 2 ways to play it. Definitely stay away from Champions Now. Like, oh my god,
not a fan.
No. Not if somebody in chat has played Champions Now and thinks that I am completely wrong, I invite you to say so, because everyone I've met that is a Champions fan is down on Champions Now. So I'd love to hear some dissenting voices on that. Hero does not have a canonical magic system. Everything is built as abilities or powers. So you are expected to build one or adopt one from another setting. Champions is almost more, it's more accurate to say Champions is like a superhero tactical war game when it comes to combat, because your positioning matters, your facing matters, not just your powers and skills, but like how good you are coordinating with other players and managing your speed. Like, I know I'm going to go on 4, 6, 8, and 10, or sorry, I'm going to go on 4, 6, 8, and 12. You're going to go on 3, 5, 8, 10, and 12. We need to coordinate so that we're together on the 12s and the 8s, right? It gets so deep. I'm shocked even discussing it now, how much I'm remembering and thinking that this is, it's natural to me. It's easy for me to remember, but that's only because I've played dozens of games of it. I can't imagine someone new showing up and trying to absorb all of this information.
Well, again, all of this is on a hex grid. Like that's a lot to do.
It very much is. They didn't use strict real world measurements. They used hexes. So you would buy 10 hexes of flight, which is about 50 miles an hour, like ish, depending on your speed stat. It would be around, I'm generalizing it, saying it's 50 miles an hour, but that's going to depend on your speed stat and various other factors. But you would buy 10 hexes worth of flight, which each hex is an inch. So it would be weird to have someone like listen in on your game and say, well, I have 10 inches of flight. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot unless you are a tiny figure on a giant map, in which case, okay, yeah, that is actually a lot. It's just a fascinating game. And there's a lot of spin-offs from it. Justice Incorporated and Danger International are actually really fun, pulpy, street level and espionage style games. If I wanted to play Ninjas and Super Spies, like from the Palladium game, I probably wouldn't play Ninjas and Super Spies. I'd probably play Danger International, because that is what it is. And I would love to see, like, Danger International is like such a great basic concept for a espionage game that it actually inspired one of my favorite games, like campaigns I never got to play, but I heard about it and it sounded fucking awesome. Do you want to hear about this, Vera?
Please, I would love to.
So I'm in college. I'm in Laramie, Wyoming, going to the University of Wyoming. My friend Charlie, who is part of the same college gaming group. It was called Knights of Enchantment. It's such a stupid name, but it was.
That's great.
It was in the 90s. So we were the Knights of Enchantment. That was our college gaming crew. And Charlie was like, I can't be with you guys tonight. I'm playing in my Delta campaign. And I'm like, what the hell is the Delta campaign? And he proceeds to tell me like the coolest concept of all time. And I'm gonna have to drink some water here before I get into it. Yeah, thank you for your patience. All right, so I asked Charlie, what the hell is the Delta campaign? He's like, okay, hear me out. So there's this organization of genetically enhanced supermen. They're trying to take over the world. There's like a genetically enhanced guy who's a super diplomat, and a genetically enhanced guy who's like an assassin, and a genetically enhanced guy who is like the best leader of all time. And they are slowly, subtly trying to dominate different aspects of the world, from politics to business to science and development of new technologies. And we are the Delta Group. We are this counter espionage group that's trying to stop these genetic Superman from taking over the world. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds pretty rad. He's like, yeah, but it gets better. And I'm like, oh, okay. He says, the leader of the genetic Superman that are trying to take over the world is a guy called Khan Noonien Singh. We are literally playing the lead up to Star Trek 2. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Nice.
It's just that little detail that like recontextualizes the whole thing. And the idea of playing street level, highly skilled agents of a secret government force versus actual Superman, like maybe not Superman, but I mean, like, stronger, tougher, faster versions of humans. That's pretty rad. Like, that sounds like a hell of a challenge. It sounds like a really cool Saturday morning cartoon. It sounds like a really good set of books. And I was just like agog. I was like, this is absolutely fantastic. And to me, that's like the expression. That's why Danger International is just a better concept to play that than, say, Feng Shui. I like Feng Shui. I like the story of Feng Shui. I think the story of Feng Shui is fun. But I think Danger International nailed it probably harder than almost anybody else, as far as the, like, we are action movie characters doing action movie things. So,
well, there's a very specific vibe to get across, right? Like, in tonality of different games is its own subject, like trying to get the right energy in the system for the kind of thing you're trying to bring across. Like, this is the problem with the generalist approach too, is that it's hard to find specific mechanics that enforce the tone you want.
Absolutely. Aaron Alston, again, had a lot of input on projects like Danger International and Justice Incorporated. He was he was in tune with ideas of things like tropes and tone. And a lot of his game design advice for those books is very much about, like, here's what the tone is, or defining the tone and maintaining that tone and building the vibes or the genre tropes in a way that made it feel like the thing you're trying to emulate. This is a lot of early game design. It's a lot of 80s and 90s stuff. But it's fascinating because it is definitely designers groping their way towards being able to better define what is tone, what is the tropes, and how are we going to engage with those at the table.
Yeah, like, there's a lot of conventions we have now that help solidify these things, even in the Session Zero era, but this is just coming out of, like, the real old school era of gaming when these concepts didn't really exist. So
yeah, it was before. I mean, there are definitely a lot of games that are based on or built on the bones of Champions. Not the least of which being D&D 3rd edition, as we mentioned earlier. It has influenced a lot of things. Oh, there's also a really great crossover book, and it's a crossover you would never expect from Champions.
Oh,
yes. So there were guys that worked on Car Wars for Steve Jackson Games, who were also writers for role-playing games. Scott Herring is one of them, and Aaron Alston is one of them. So they made a book called Auto Duel Champions, which is all about a weird mashup of Mad Max gladiators in cars and superheroes. Now, what's astonishing about this is like Auto Duel is so dark. It is so Mad Max, casual killing, mass slaughter, oppressive governments, just like it is dark AF, right, for the 80s. And superheroes were definitely not. I mean, like you could argue, I guess, Dark Knight Returns and some of the other books of that era were edging in that direction, like Watchmen. But by and large, most people who wanted to play superheroes were not wanting to go quite that dark. So it was a very strange combo. And it was vehicular combat and superheroes. Just like, how do you make that work? I don't know. I don't know. Then, of course, the Strike Force book that Aaron Alston wrote was just fascinating because it's the first time anybody ever published, like, this is what a long-term campaign should look like. And that's a Champions book that I urge anybody out there who's curious about, how to run a long-term campaign. It's a fascinating book to read. This is, Vera and I have talked about the concept of blue booking before.
Yes.
That's from Strike Force. And Aaron would do all these, he did a lot of really fun stuff with like communicating with his players. Like he would circulate little questionnaires to his players every 6 months or so, asking them what are things they wanted to see and how much pain did they want their character to go through along the way. No, seriously, like he was leaning into that soap opera level of, please torture me. I want angst, or I want a romantic connection, or I want a supervillain who is also my father. These are things that he would communicate with his group about. And this is something that I wish he'd been able to incorporate more deeply into Champions, because a lot of it, as I said, became about avoiding concerns with your character, like your battle suit, or, the fact that kryptonite takes away your powers. If the game master never touched it, it was like it didn't exist.
Right, because like in modern gaming, we think of these weaknesses as ways to set up narratives for the character. Like Iron Man, we talked about weaknesses, booze, famously. Like that's a whole story beat. Kryptonite, like narratively, arcs related to like, oh no, all the kryptonite's here now. There's a lot that can be done there.
Yeah.
We would expect this now, right?
Pretty much. I mean, how would you, so this is probably a good time to talk about, like, what would you do for a superhero campaign? What would you, well, maybe not even superheroes. Like so the Champions, the hero system is universal. You can do anything you want with it. It functions a little bit better with superheroes and spies and shit like that more than it does with anything else. What would you want to do with the hero system?
I would run JoJo. Absolutely. I have never seen a system that's as good for running JoJo. Like you can do it in GURPS, I guess, but like the idea of these abstract power systems, it works great. It's perfect. Like what more do you need? You can just tie together different core ability elements and you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you want to engage with Dark Champions and do something a little more gritty, a little more street level? Or would you want to do something a little more, Justice League with the Watchtower in space?
I mean, I feel like I would want to keep things a little street level, have like your major antagonist. I would literally build out stands like, here we've got fabulous secret powers. Shout out to He-Man. Here's our
I have the power. The world,
yeah. Like build your core antagonist. It would depend on the players though, because this is the kind of game where you need to have a shared understanding of tone, really.
Now I'm gonna step out for just a second. I'll be right back, but I would like you to keep talking about like what kind of superhero game you'd want to run.
Well, no, it's because JoJo is superheroes. Like, okay, this is kind of twisting the prompt a little bit, but I think there's a lot of potential there because, of course, JoJo is I would say it's a little bit comic book inspired. No one's read it. It's affirmatively the kind of narrative where there are superpowers and super powered individuals, and the story is largely about grappling with that and figuring out how to work around these things. And it's compelling. It's the sort of thing that I buy into. So it is easily the first place my head goes. I feel like you could run that pretty effectively in this. Like individual stands, the punching ghost, it's got a short range, it can pummel things well, or you got like ranged projectile characters. There's so much you could do. Like my fantasy JoJo game is, I would say, accommodated for here. Like, I'm thinking this through now. You could build individual stands, because again, we've got this like very, very complex power system, but it doesn't even make sense for a stand. Like, okay, sure, if you've got a television set in the room, you can do this and that. You can remote view. You can work off of your core systems to build out like the punching ghost, the range projectile character, to divine things, to transform things. There's stands that turn people into other things. There's systems for that in this, to transfer power. There's that accommodated for. There's so much allowed here. I think that it's one of the only places I've seen that it just obviously slots in, because you can build in D20. I've seen like a fan system for JoJo built in D20 RPGs, but any stand you can think of is accommodated for somehow in this 120 pages of character creation. So welcome back. Hello.
Yes, I was thinking about what you said about, doing JoJo, and actually two things came to mind of more recent versions of superheroes that I think would be really interesting to do in Hero System.
Oh yeah?
The first one would be My Hero Academia.
Ooh.
And the reason why is because in My Hero Academia, your power is not necessarily, it's part of your identity, but it has its own identity. Like what power you have is not just intrinsic to you, but it has its own name. And it has, in some cases, like for Deku and One for All, it has a legacy of its own that's not necessarily yours. And Champions would be a really good way to do that specifically. Also, Champions does really well when you have characters that have essentially one power that can be expressed multiple ways.
Yes, it's the same reasoning here. Like a Nen could run okay in this. Like a lot of these anime power sets where the character's personality and skill set is often lateral to them. Like Gon is an excellent fisherman, has nothing to do with his Nen ability. He's like a survivalist. He's a wild child. He can talk to animals. Totally irrelevant to rock, paper, scissors. Same in JoJo. Like you've got a stellar artists, incredible chefs whose powers are related to that a little bit, but not essentially connected to them.
The other one that I think would work really well is because, and this is because Champions or Hero System is so focused on defining what a power does and how strong it is and like things like that, that I think One Punch Man would be really fascinating. Because
how do you build that? How do you build the one punch?
Well, see, that's the thing, is that whatever Saitama is or can do is just outside of that power set. So everyone else is building, the Hero Association, and like Saitama is an NPC, and he's just stronger than everything else. He's literally out of the scale, and that's what One Punch Man is about. Is he doesn't scale. He's so far beyond what everybody else is, it doesn't matter. He just becomes an ideal to aspire to, right? Like that's literally how it works. And I think Champions would be fascinating in that perspective, but again, I would almost always turn to a different game these days, just not only because Champions is dead, but because it lacks a lot of features and functionality that I tend to prefer these days, like the boost mechanics of Inspiration or Benny's. I love being able to give that stuff out as a game master, and I love to be able to use it as a player. It's just it's become something I crave at the table.
I confess freely that I am deeply afraid of running hex combat. I see it and I know fear.
Okay, yeah, I would. Yeah, unfortunately, one of the realities of Champions is that it is very tactical and does often come down to a map and a dry erase marker and some figures to represent your guys. Because it is very important to know, like, how many guys am I hitting with this attack and where are they, and can I knock someone back into a wall for extra damage?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I would not be shocked to learn that hero clicks and the way that hero clicks ended up working on the table was not heavily influenced by Champions' combat.
I can see that. I can see that.
Here's an interesting comment. Mickey Stopwatch. Hey, good to see you, sir. Don't you know that the hexes provide a more accurate measurement of distance?
I openly fear the accuracy. I am an estimation style creature. I tend to gravitate towards vagary and the vibe. I learned a long time ago not to put specific numbers for distance and things in my writing where I can avoid it, and this fear extends to the table.
All right, I'm gonna put on my old man hat. I've been playing role-playing games since 1983. It's a long fucking time of playing role-playing games. And I can tell you with some authority, hex maps are fine. There's nothing wrong with them per se, but I vastly prefer square maps, partially because it's just so much easier to draw straight lines for things like walls, buildings, doors, windows, stuff that you will see on a battlefield are far more better represented by squares than they are by hexes. And it's just so much easier to worry about 90-degree angles than all the weird 45-degree angles you get with hexes.
It's true that squares also offer comfort to me. I am reassured by this.
Man of a certain age, Pat. Yes, thank you, Spitfire. Yes, I am a man of a certain age, and therefore I'm here to tell you that I think that square maps are just the best. I'd rather have a square map. Honestly, the battle maps you can get today, like almost all of them are square maps. Like there's hardly any hex maps unless you're playing BattleTech, I guess. There's hardly any hex maps you can find out there. And the majority of like the really good battle maps you can get from Kickstarters and stuff like that. My roommate's a map fanatic, and we have just a ton of fantastic maps for our games. But they're all squares, and that doesn't bother me a bit. Yeah, I have never once sat there and thought, man, this should really be a hex map. But hexes became so intrinsic to Hero System's identity that 5th edition Hero System is literally just a guy inside a hex as the cover. That's the cover image. It's a guy inside a hex, and that became like their logo.
It looks like a geometry textbook, dude.
It does, and a guy inside a hex became the face of the system. That's literally the symbol of the Hero System, and I'm like, sure, why not? It's hexes are the Hero System. I just you know what? It's the Hero System is a history of like really cool ideas and some really bad decisions. Just it's like that's the whole framework of it. I can say this also. I know for a fact that Bruce Harlick and Steve Peterson and George McDonald and Ray Greer have all played Prowlers and Paragons, and I believe I've heard secondhand all 4 of them prefer Prowlers and Paragons to Champions. So even the original creators are like, yeah, we're games have moved on. The forbidden numbers. 679 or 80085. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Boobs. That's the forbidden numbers.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
It was 6-7 yesterday. We are free for another month or so.
Month. Yeah, we've done a lot of it.
Well, in Europe, it's going to be 7-6, or rather 6-7. Look forward to round 2 in July.
Are we about to do that Pulp Fiction thing about the Royale with cheese and why it's called that? The metric system.
No, we might.
So seriously speaking, this is our first episode of season 2.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, is there what are you wanting to do differently with Lorebeards role playing season 2 than from season 1? What are things you're looking forward to doing with this show?
Well, I'm looking forward to doing a bunch of conceptual episodes to covering big ideas and tabletop things. I'm looking forward to spinning up our actual plays. Super excited. We're going to be playing a few one-shots this season, starting with Empire Satanas. I'm traveling right now, but not too long after I return, we're going to tuck in. I'm looking forward to having some guests on for those. Looking forward to do some more cool interviews. I think we're going to do some neat stuff. I'm looking forward to possibly doing a little bit of homebrew development that we're going to put up on the Patreon. There's some exciting things brewing.
Now, when you say big ideas, and first of all, I'm fascinated. I love doing big ideas for role playing games. What kind of stuff are you thinking about? Like, what are some examples of big ideas in role playing that you'd like to dive into?
We've talked about broad table concepts already, right? Just like 101 intro to playing, intro to GMing. I want to get a little more specific. It could be fun to take submissions for concepts people are interested in having explored their table or things they wish they had advice about and covered those. It could be fun to talk about things like tone setting, like covering how to establish different tones. We discussed horror a little bit. It could be fun to delve into heroism versus superheroism, even things we've covered in brief today that are referenced in the core books here. Just stuff that's useful and practical and broadly applicable. I like thinking about the meta and macro of tabletop game design and how it comes into play at the table. So ideas related to those bigger concepts are exciting to me, like a 201 course, perhaps.
I would love to do some 201s. There's actually a super chat from earlier in the show I'm going to bring back because it's a question I think you could answer more differently than I did. Because my answer was basically just communicate, like talk to your players, do a session 0, lay out your concerns, and try to work things out honestly. But I think you might have more to say about this. And the topic is Brock 6000 says a bunch of his friends and family are reading Dungeon Crawler Carl, and he loves the fact that this is getting them interested in tabletop role-playing games, but he's worried that the style of Dungeon Crawler Carl, I can speak, will push them to be extreme power or metagamers, and he wants to know what are some advice to deal with that.
Well, lit RPG in general is based on the idea of sort of exploiting game systems and getting as strong as possible. And it's very number focused, very crunch focused, very simulated, power simulation focused. It is power fantasy as a narrative, right? And I would say it is healthy to be worried that people's interests coming fresh in from that are going to be about making a really strong, tough guy. Like if somebody comes to you after they've been reading Solo Leveling and they say, I want to play Sung Jin Woo, you start to sweat a little bit, right? You're a little bit concerned about this because this is a character who not only, like in the name, doesn't play well with others, but also someone who is very inwardly focused and not necessarily a character you would want in your group. Like
episode 4, Sung Jin Woo is an interesting character. Season 2, Sung Jin Woo is probably a little stronger than you're going to be like, I don't know. This going to be tough to deal with.
Yeah, like your challenge as a GM in that kind of spot is to find a way to get them to buy into the narrative of your table and to get them to invest in the people they're playing with and to find a healthy outlet for their mechanical crunch fantasy, because a lot of people in the lit RPG scene are fascinated by like the different exploits, little hacks and things they can find. And you can play a table where that is encouraged. This is very possible to run a table or run a game where you want people to play mechanically with the system and do things that are a little funny with it. But everybody has to be in for this, and it'll affect the tone of the game. You could do like a really meta game that works well with this. It'd be possible. You could play into it deliberately and have your characters fully aware of the game systems they're playing with.
That is something I'd like to explore more. And I think Hero is actually one of the systems I would use if I was going to go with this is a game where you are playing as characters who are fully cognizant of all the rules that are in play, right? And I would look at anime like Overlord or Log Horizon. I'm loving Log Horizon. That's a fucking awesome anime.
Heck yeah.
And both of those animes are about characters who are very, very, very aware that there is an underlying set of rules and mechanics for everything in the world. It's not like it, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but let's just say that it is a meta awareness of how stuff works, and using champions for that would be pretty fascinating, because then you would literally be like, okay, so my stat is X and it means this, and how can I use that to affect change in the world, as opposed to trying to justify it through superpowers or other concepts. Like there is a level of interesting meta storytelling you can do based around that.
I would call anything like this a definitive vibe changer at the table, though. Like, if they really want to evoke that kind of lit RPG storytelling, they're coming at the narrative from a different perspective than you might be. Like, it's the kind of thing where session 0 is really important, setting expectations are really important.
Yeah, well, sessions, we have a whole episode on session 0 for a reason. It is very important. I do recommend everyone check that one out. Hey, we've got a super chat from TBI Hydroarchaeology.
Thanks so much.
Fun name. Why don't you read this one?
Yeah, TBI Hydroarchaeology says, going back to the White Whale episode got me making a narrative framework for a Babylon 5 game. Very cool. Very cool. El Clasico.
Database. Just live it in the database, says Mickey Stopwatch. Yeah, Babylon 5, our last best hope for humanity. I love that show, and it would be wild to do a good role-playing game for Babylon 5. I would love to see that happen. I would sign up for that if it was a convention game. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a cool idea.
Underrepresented particular show for sure. There's a lot of ways you could go. There's a lot of interesting things you could do with Babylon 5. I don't know. Are you familiar, Vera? Did you watch?
A little.
So there's the Psi Corps, which is a particular group from Earth that is all psychics, and they are somewhat sinister, but they're also basically everywhere. And that's one aspect. There's the idea of the Shadow of Orlon War, which is a big background, almost like a 40K War in Heaven kind of thing. That is still echoing into today. There's all the politics between the Narn and the Centauri and the Minbari and all these other species that has got a veneer of something like Game of Thrones with a lot of political maneuvering. And then there's the corruption within the Earth government itself. There's a lot. It's very timely in a lot of ways.
It's on my list of shows that I've watched piecemeal with my mother growing up, who is a big sci-fi head.
Professor Shapp, I was there at the dawn of the third age of mankind. Yes.
Yes. Yay, historical times. We're doing it.
That show was shockingly good at some points, and then also shockingly bad at some points. It was very, very much like early next gen Star Trek, where you're like, wow, that was an amazing episode, followed by, oh my God, that's horrible. What are you doing? What even are you doing? But yeah, I'm a massive Babylon 5 nerd. I have all the DVDs upstairs. And it's frankly been too long since I watched it. I should probably go watch it again. Had some really good novels too, I should point out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Champions, one of the things that the Champions struggled with was their universe, especially in 5th edition. And I'll explain why. Champions 1st through 4th edition had ideas for things like Star Hero and Fantasy Hero, but those were separate timelines. Okay, the fantasy timeline was its own timeline. The superhero timeline was its own timeline. The sci-fi timeline was its own timeline. There was no crossover between them. They were just like, here's a setting for you to use if you want to use Hero System to do this particular genre at your table. Okay, there's nothing wrong with it. It worked just fine. 5th edition Champions comes along, and again, the designer Steve Long wrote the majority of the stuff. And Steve was like, here's what I want to do. I want to have all the timelines in one timeline. So there was a fantasy era of Earth that is in like a prehistorical era and then ends, and then the historical era that we know begins, and then superheroes show up at this time, and superheroes last from this year to this year, and then it becomes no more superheroes, but it's all sci-fi from this point forward, kind of stuff. And locking everything together in one timeline was actually counterproductive. And the reason why is because it shut down a lot of traditional superhero tropes like time travel, alternate dimensions, and, you know, if you had a character who was an alien, like let's say you wanted to be, you know, kind of like Marvel Carol Danvers and have the Kree Empire and the Kree Skrull War and all that stuff going on. Yeah, well, that was all hundreds of years in the future where there were no superheroes. And if you wanted to be like the Shining Knight from DC, who's a character from Arthurian legend who is the time traveled forward to take part in the superhero world, you could do that, but you could basically never return to the fantasy side. It was just a very awkward experiment in world building that I don't think really worked out, because the way that superheroes like to jump around and do things at different timelines. I mean, I would argue that it is a classic staple of superhero storytelling for the heroes to time travel back to either the Old West, World War II, or both.
I did all of that in Star Trek.
Right? Yeah, they did. They did do that in Star Trek, but they also did it in the Avengers. They also did it in Justice League. And I would argue that, you know, having aliens as part of your group that are from existing or just, you know, or usually from existing civilizations. I mean, Martian Manhunter is an example of the last. Him and Superman are both the last of their kind, basically, which is weird that they're on the same team. I should point that out.
It's great.
It's a little weird, isn't it? I'm just saying. Anyway, so if you have an alien on your team, which a lot of these groups did, and especially in the 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s comics had a lot of characters who were aliens. You want to be able to explore that. You want to believe that there is a civilization out there that you can interact with or send messages to and from, or, Starfire from the Teen Titans, she's Tamaranian. She has a sister. She has a royal family. There's wars going on her home planet. That's all part of her story as a character. But that just wasn't really possible in the 5th edition version of the Champions universe. It got weird.
I will say,
go ahead.
This is my comic nitpick. I think it works. I think it works because Superman is an immigrant alien and the Martian Manhunter is a little green man, and they are distinguished in this way, and that I think is effective.
No, I'm not critiquing those characters or their backstory. I'm just saying it's hard to fit them into that particular approach to a timeline. But you know, I don't want to dwell on. I'll just say I don't think that it's just the setting was handled well.
Very different vibes. Yeah.
Like something I love in comics that I've always wanted to do but never have. There's a white whale. Here's a white whale. I've always wanted to do the Legion of Superheroes. Like, we're in the 32nd century, and you know, we're not stopping trouble in Gotham or Metropolis. We're stopping trouble on Earth and on Beta Centauri. You know, it's you expand the scope out. You expand the tropes out to a higher, larger, bigger, badder plane. Everything is bigger. Everything is more cosmic. And I think there's a lot of advantage for Legion of Superheroes. And I'm not alone. Professor Shapp says, "Long live the Legion!" Woo! Yeah. What are some superhero things that you'd like to do that you think Hero System might? I mean, I think you nailed it with the Lit RPG, by the way. Great pick. But what is there anything else?
I'm a big fan of Venom Lethal Protector. I would enjoy that kind of beat a lot.
We lost you. Venom Lethal Protector, and then you froze.
Oh no. I would enjoy that kind of beat a lot. I quite enjoy this scene.
That'd be good. Dark Champions.
Yeah, Dark Champions would work well because he plays well with I would say the more edgy side of the setting. Like Spider-Man is nice for relief, but he's eating people. So
Yeah, it's very Iron Age, right? Like it's very Iron Age comics.
yeah.
Yeah, this is where Cable and X-Force are around the corner, not it's not Wolverine and Cyclops. It's Cable and Shatterstar are hanging
To
out
be
right
then
now.
followed by Cable and Deadpool.
Right, yeah, Deadpool.
Much later, which is another total shift, I would say.
Yeah, but he's definitely an Iron Age character and would fit into an Iron Age type game. I would say surprisingly, I might like the one place I might say Champions is still like the preeminent system would be for something like a Deadpool or Iron Age game. I think that would fit in very, very well with the granularity of the skills and the way that the character building allows you to build exactly the character you want, but also gives you a pretty gritty breakdown of like how the damage impacts you and stuff like that. Yeah, I think that might be where Champions would actually shine today.
I could see it.
Godzilla Rex says, my superhero team, Last Sons, is made up of a lot of the last of a bunch of alien races.
Oh, that's cute.
That's actually really cool. I dig it. Kind of makes me want to like do an anti-death watch in Warhammer 40K, where it's a bunch of different aliens that have teamed up to like learn how to fight the Imperium and spread their knowledge.
Oh, that's so much fun! Like they've all run into like space marines who just obliterated their families, and they're like, "All right, fuck these guys."
Right? We're gonna learn how to fight them and then take that back home.
I kind of like that.
That would be pretty wild. Yeah. Oh, Godzilla Rex points out 2099. Yes, that would also be very good.
Oh yeah. Which has re-entered relevance kind of because of the Spider-Verse stuff.
No, I actually have a pitch for a setting book, which is called Beyond 2099, and it's about cyberpunk superhero role playing. And it would be that. It would be Batman Beyond. It would be 2099. It would be that. And yeah, Champions would work well for that. Although I think you could absolutely do it in Prowlers and Paragons. And I would love to write this book. Please, someone pay me to write this book. I would love to write that book. Maybe I'll have to publish it myself. You never know. Have you ever wanted to do cyberpunk superheroes?
I think that cyberpunk tonally disagrees with the concept of superheroes. I think that Cable does it pretty well, but cyberpunk is about a world where end stage capitalism has won and you are scrounging in the wake of it. And it is very sad. It is a very sad environment.
Can be. 2099's tone did vary from like nihilistic to depressing to kind of heroic. But I would say, like, for me, Batman Beyond is a pretty good way to do it with a lot more classic superhero tropes.
Batman Beyond, I like a lot. I think it is still about how things are kind of screwed, though. It is like the narrative background is it's like the dying gasps, and even like not to spoil Batman Beyond, even Terry's own life and the nature of his being is sort of a sad state of affairs. So it's all pretty grim. It remains like he's a hero, but he's in this environment where what he does matters somehow even less than what Batman did in old Gotham.
That's you're not wrong. It's a little more bleak than that I like to look at it, but I think you've made a really good point that ultimately even Batman Beyond is just restoring things to a status quo that is already bad. at best, he's like, yeah, I'm going to keep the status quo going, which is not a good idea.
It's kind of a downer. Like there's no way around this.
Well, I do feel like there's a creative answer. I'm sure someone can come up with a really cool way to do cyberpunk superheroes and make it feel more meaningful. But I think you're right that it is it's just a side branch off of Dark Champions. It is still a bleak and gritty. It's still a bleak and gritty way to play superheroes.
you want your players to feel like they have agency. And I think having like too much agency is rough for a cyberpunk setting. They should feel as if they are being squished by gears around them, right, at all times. It's the vibe that I think is appropriate for it. You can do like a transhumanism futuristic stuff, like most ways, like based on the Takeshi Kovacs books, which are a little more flexible with the tone. But for like true classic cyberpunk, it's like, boy, everything sucks. The corpos are here. They own us. Oh no.
I like your description of, like, the invisible hand. That's, to me, that's always been like how I want to try and get the trope of oppression coming across, is I want you to feel that invisible weight weighing you down, right? There should be a feeling like when you walk outside, and if you really want that oppression to be there, when you walk outside, you should feel a little suffocated. Even in the freedom of the open air, you should feel like just there's some kind of holding me back a little bit, not quite underwater, but almost, pressure.
Yeah. The invisible hand of the market is squeezing you into a tiny ball. If I could put on a narrative hat, in Batman Beyond, I think the old heroes, the legacy claiming is questionable. Like, there's a crossover between Batman Beyond and Static Shock that I quite like.
Oh yeah.
Where the takeaway is that Static gets back and he's like, oh my God, the future is horrible. And the moral is, maybe if he tries really hard, he can change it. Like, it's pretty dire.
It's a good point. Static Shock, also a fantastic character. Very underrated. Very underrated.
Big Static
show too. Yeah, same. Did you ever see Zeta? The show that Dwayne McDuffie? You should research it, because there was a show that they tried to make called Zeta about a robot that eventually the robot ended up in a few episodes of Batman Beyond, I think. But it was one of Dwayne McDuffie's ideas, the Zeta Project. Anyway, it's fascinating stuff. If you're into Static Shock and Batman Beyond, this is something kind of interesting about the whole deal. The DC animated universe in general. The DC animated universe in general is something I could talk about for at least 90 minutes. It's just fascinating.
Well, you can run the DCAU in Hero System A, so
you can. I would argue it's not the best, because DCAU is a lot more. It's a lot more focused on the tropes of superheroism rather than the nitty gritty details of, like, just how strong is Superman. But I don't know. Like, I'm sure it could work. But I feel more and more lately that Champions is just more well suited to gritty, low level stuff. And Prowlers and Paragons where I would go for, like, actual Justice League or actual Teen Titans type games. So there you go.
It is a more modern game.
Do you have any final thoughts on the Hero System?
Pretty cool stuff. I am a big fan of heroics in general. I think there is a room here for a wide range of fun campaigns. If you have the stomach for the hex grid, if you have the stomach for the character creation. I'm a crunch enjoyer, so this is always, like, kind of called to me, and I was excited to talk about it a little bit.
All right, so I have been both the Hero System's biggest fan and its biggest critic in the past. Mm-hmm. I feel like that transition started out at the biggest fan and has just over time grown more and more and more and more into a critic. And partially that's because the game itself, I hate to say it, I think the game itself devolved. I think its height was 4th edition, when it was so comic booky and so bright, and it was not so much about defining each and every aspect of your character as it was just a really cool way to build something from the comics or something from your own imagination in a way that made sense mechanically. It's what got me interested in doing game design at all. Like, I started to tinker with how rules worked thanks to 4th edition Champions. But over time, it just got more and more complex, more and more hyper detailed. And I think ultimately the Champions and Hero System, it's a relic. It's a relic of the past. It died in 2020 and it's very unlikely to ever return. And that's
RIP.
It's a shame, but at the same time, it kind of, I feel like unless it evolves, and it certainly shows no sign of doing that, but unless it evolves, I think it's going to remain in that dustbin of history. Prowlers or Paragons is the future for people who like that. Please go look at Prowlers or Paragons. It's made by a good friend of mine, Len Pimentel, and he is a really good game designer. Prowlers or Paragons will give you everything you want from Champions, with everything you don't want taken out. Yes.
Yeah, you heard it here. Play Prowlers, play Paragons, enjoy, check it out. Cool stuff happening.
That's right. And speaking of cool stuff happening, we are in season 2. We're going to have an episode next week. We don't know what that episode is going to be about yet, but we are going to cover Lancer really soon, sometime soon. Vera's working it out.
Mm-hmm.
Lancer is going to be interesting, and I do want to talk about some of the products. So hopefully we will have a poll up, maybe not this week, but soon. And we're going to have that one shot coming. Anything else you'd like to say?
Thank you guys for coming. Sorry again for the brief delay. I'm on a fishing trip, so there is some setup hoo-ha, but glad I could make it. I feel like a hero getting things solved.
Vera, I'm so glad you were able to join us today. Hero System is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I could talk about it a very, very long time. I could go way more in depth about like what needs to change to make Champions more a modern game. I could go way more in depth about the things I really like about it. But I think we covered it. I think we, spent 3 hours discussing it, and that's probably all we need to for Hero System. So until next time.
You really all. Thanks so much for coming out.